The Senate will come to order. Senator Murphy,
Mr. President, I impose a call of the Senate.
the Senate is now under call. Senator Murphy.
Mr. President, I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and that the Sergeant-at-Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, if you would be so kind as to stand. In the tradition of the Senate, we start each session with prayer. Today's chaplain is Pastor Dave Dorning from People of Hope Lutheran Church in Rochester. As a gentle reminder, following the prayer, please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning. Let us pray. Eternal source of wisdom and compassion, we gather today with humble hearts and a shared commitment to serve the people of this state. In the presence of many faith traditions and those who proclaim no faith tradition, we ask for guidance rooted in justice, mercy, truth, and compassion. May you grant those who govern the courage to do so with integrity, the wisdom to make decisions that uplift every community, and the compassion to especially protect and empower the most vulnerable among us: the poor, the sick, the elderly, the hungry, the unhoused, the marginalized, and the forgotten. May their work reflect the highest calling of public service, to do good not just for the powerful or the popular, but for all, regardless of background, status, or belief. May you bless the communities that they are called to serve: the Iron Range, the Metro, the Med City, the farming communities of southeastern Minnesota, the plains of southwestern Minnesota, the entirety of the North Star State. In unity, may they rise above division to build a future marked by dignity, opportunity, and peace. May this chamber be where hope takes root and justice grows strong for every person in their care. Peace, so may it be. Amen.
Thank you, members. The secretary will take the roll.
Abler, Anderson, Barr, Bolden, Carlson, Champion, Clark, Coleman, Swadzinski, Dames, Dibble, Dornick, Draheim, Drazkowski, Duckworth, Farnsworth, Fateh, Frentz, Green, Grunhagen, Gustafson, Hochschild, Herr, Heinzman, Hoffman, Housley, Howe, Jasinski, Johnson Stewart, Klein, Curran, Kroon, Kunish, Kupek, Lang, Latz, Liskey, Limmer, Lucero, Mann, Marty, Matthews, Mayquaid, McEwen, Miller, Mitchell, Mohammed, Murphy, Nelson, Umuver Baton, Pappas, Pa, Port, Pratt, Putnam, Rarick, Rasmussen, Rest, Seeberger, Utke, Weber, Wiesenberg, Westland, Westrom, Wickland, Zhang.
Members, a quorum is present. The following members intend to vote from a remote location under Rule 40.7. Senator Port. Members, if you'd like to follow along, I'm reading from today's agenda, which is dated Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. We will begin at the third order of business. Messages from the House. The Secretary will read the message.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce that the House has acceded to the request of the Senate for the appointment of a conference committee consisting of 4 members of the House on the amendments adopted by the House to the following Senate file. Senate File Number 3045, a bill for an act relating to state government operations establishing a biennial budget. There has been appointed as such committee on the part of the House Cleavorn, Nash, Freiberg, and Altendorf. Senate File Number 3045 is herewith returned to the Senate, signed Patrick Duffy Murphy, Chief Clerk, House of Representatives.
Members, no action is required. We will now proceed to the fifth order of business, which is reports of committees. There are 2 committee reports to read at the desk. The Secretary will read the reports.
Senator Marty from the Committee on Finance, to which was re-referred Senate File Number 856, a bill for an act relating to state government, creating the Office of Inspector General, reports the same back with a recommendation that the bill be amended as follows, and when so amended, the bill do pass. And Senator Marty from the Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate File Number 3446, a bill for an act relating to claims against the state, providing for the settlement of certain claims appropriating money, reports the same back with the recommendation that the bill be amended as follows, and when so amended, the bill do pass.
Senator Murphy for a motion to adopt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the committee reports read by the Secretary be adopted.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. We'll now proceed to the sixth order of business, which is the second reading of Senate bills. The Secretary will read the Senate file numbers.
Senate File Numbers 856 and 3446.
The Senate files have been given their second reading. Members will now proceed to the eighth order of business, which is introduction and first reading of Senate bills. The bills listed on today's introduction calendar are given their first reading and referred as indicated. We will now proceed to the ninth order of business, which is motions and resolutions. We will adopt the author's motions as one. All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, we will let you know that Senate Resolution numbers 39 to 41 will be referred to the Committee on Rules and Administration. And remember, no action is required. Remaining under motions and resolutions, Senator Murphy to designate special orders.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Rule 26, I designate the following bills be made special orders for immediate considerations. Members, the list is on your desk. Have a good day.
That is correct. The special orders list, which is dated May 7, 2025, is on your desk. We will begin with House File 2130, Senator Latz.
Mr. President and members, today, the perpetrator of a homicide by drunk driving in St. Louis Park pled guilty to third-degree murder and killing two patrons, actually one patron and one server at the Park Tavern in St. Louis Park, and injuring a dozen other people. This happened last year, and it spurred us, those of us who represent St. Louis Park in the legislature, to look for appropriate improvements to the DWI laws so that this could be prevented in the future. It turned out that the perpetrator had a valid driver's license because he had successfully completed and essentially graduated from the ignition interlock requirements, had completed treatment, and was driving with an unrestricted driver's license. Unfortunately, he started drinking again and was driving his vehicle, in this case, with a .33 alcohol concentration. The remedy that we came up with is now in the bill that is presented to you here today. The basic premise is that the ignition interlock device, which requires, when it's in a vehicle, requires the driver to blow into it and have no alcohol in his or her system or their breath before the vehicle will start. Then they are allowed to start the vehicle. For the 35% or so of people who are required to have interlock who use it, it's a very, very effective safety device on our roads. It's in use across the country. The evidence is quite clear on that. Unfortunately, not everyone who should use ignition interlock is on it. So this bill does two basic things to create more requirements for use of ignition interlock. One is it extends the look-back period from 10 years to 20 years for purposes of invoking that requirement. So if a person has a prior alcohol-related driving offense on their record within the last 20 years, and they get another offense, they will be required to use the interlock in their vehicle in order to drive lawfully. The second thing that this bill does in framework is that it extends the duration of the requirement for the ignition interlock. Right now, the duration depends upon the number of priors that one has, but it doesn't go up any more than 6 years. This is a more dynamic system where it actually will escalate the duration higher and higher depending on the number of priors. The individual in the Park Tavern case had 5 prior DWIs, but they've been spread out over a period of time of around 30 years. So this extending the look-back period will capture more cases and would have required this driver also to be on interlock had this law been in effect at the time. Another framework of the bill is to try to increase the uptake level for people who are required to drive with interlock to get them actually into the program. This has the effect, this bill proposes to reduce the financial barriers to getting into the interlock by changing the deadline for paying for the license reinstatement, which is $680 by statute, rather than requiring all of it up front, allowing it to be paid out over the time of the ignition interlock requirement. It increases the criminal penalties for driving without ignition interlock if one is required to have it. It also makes a number of other changes, including the requirement of completion of treatment, not just the start of treatment, for one to graduate out of the ignition interlock program. It extends or adds the availability of and requirement of ignition interlock for those who have committed criminal vehicular homicide, so that the people who do commit a crime of this nature while drunk, they will be able to drive lawfully with ignition interlock and with insurance in their vehicles, which will increase the use of this safety device rather than leaving those individuals with little option but to either stay off the roads altogether or drive a vehicle without interlock, without insurance, still to get to their jobs, to get to the grocery store, and to get their children to school and other activities. We know as a matter of fact that many people drive without valid licenses when that's the position they're put in, and we want to move them into the safe driving category. There are a few other more technical corrections that go into this. I won't say technical because they're not technically, but smaller improvements, I should say, to the administration of the DWI laws. It will allow plate impoundment by affixing a sticker to the plates rather than the confiscation of the plates, and create a crime to remove or damage that sticker. It extends the length of time for the temporary driver's license to be in effect so people have time to get the interlock. It does provide for judicial review for decisions to extend the interlock or propose violations of the program in response to a Supreme Court decision as well. And it makes some changes to the forfeiture laws that will enable more people to drive any vehicle that they want rather than just the vehicle that was proposed for forfeiture if they meet all the other safety reinstatement requirements such as the interlock program. It also will count out-of-state priors for purposes of the look-back period, and it clarifies the start date for judicial appeals. So with that, members, this is a good, solid bill to improve the safety on our roads. I encourage your support for it, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Latz. Members, comments or amendments to House File 2130, Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer the A2 amendment.
Senator Champion offers the A2 amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Champion moves to amend House File Number 2130 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 18, after line 9, insert. This is the A2 amendment.
Senator Champion to the A2 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The A2 amendment, I'm hoping this will be considered a friendly amendment. The A2 amendment recognizes two things. One is that a person who may be a participant in the program, their vehicle may become inoperable, or they've had to transfer ownership due to it, failing or for whatever reason. And what it does is that it says whoever is in such a position and they inform the commissioner that they will no longer have this vehicle because it's inoperable or they had to transfer it, that their participation in the program can be suspended and they not be subject to any additional tests. But if the person chooses to return, then that person's time that they spent earlier can be credited, because you usually pay and you do a number of different things. So we don't want a person to have to start over if there's some financial situation that doesn't allow them to continue. The second part of it is, so that's what we will call voluntary, but even if it was involuntary, if you look at line 2.18, when a person who was involuntarily terminated from the program, and when they re-enter the program, they shall be given credit for the time they spent on the program before termination. That is just to make sure that if you've already paid and you've been a part of the program, that you should at least be credited for it. Doesn't mean you can't be subject to any violations or anything of that nature, but it's just so that the person doesn't have to pay twice. So that's the amendment, and I would hope that we can get support, because that will help Minnesotans.
Thank you, Senator Champion. We'll go to the author of the bill, Senator Latz.
Mr. President and members, I've read through the A2 amendment. It does address some what I would characterize as glitches in the current ignition interlock program. Will make it easier for people to remain in the program or get back into the program, and is also realistic in the way it approaches the voluntary and involuntary terminations from the program. So I think this would be a good amendment. I'd support it.
Thank you, Senator Latz. Members, further comments or amendments or discussion? Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Champion yield for a question?
Senator Champion will yield. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Champion. When I look at page 2, line 18, and we're talking about an individual who is involuntarily terminated from the ignition interlock program, could you give me some examples as to why someone would be involuntarily terminated?
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Rasmussen, for that question. For an example, if a vehicle is no longer inoperable, and if you fail to tell the department within a certain prescribed amount of time, let's say it's supposed to be 10 days, and you tell them on the 12th day, you will have been involuntarily terminated from the program. And so I just wanted to make sure that something like that doesn't prevent a person from receiving credit for the time that they've already served.
Thank you, Senator Champion. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will Senator Champion continue to yield?
Senator Champion will yield. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Champion. When I look at page 1, line 30, and it talks about suspension of participation in the program, it talks about that instance where a program participant may have a vehicle who's inoperable. So my question, Mr. President, to Senator Champion is, doesn't that language starting on page 1, line 30 address the example you gave for involuntary termination?
Senator Champion.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you for the question, Senator Rasmussen. No, because that means a person within that amount of time, let's say the 10 days, alerted the commissioner within that time, and there was nothing or barrier that didn't prevent them from being able to notify the department within the 10 days. So then, if it's within the 10 days, then that would be a voluntary termination. But remember earlier that I said, if a person does it after the 10 days, maybe it's the 11th day or the 12th day, and it wasn't within the prescribed time, then that would be considered an involuntary termination, even though it's because of the repair or a decision decision that they can no longer afford the car.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the information, Senator Champion. I guess I'm a little concerned with on the second page where if we have an individual who is involuntarily terminated because they effectively didn't follow the rules, that then they would get credit for the time that they spent in the program before termination. And I think the overall point of this bill is to make sure that we take driving under the influence of alcohol very seriously and that we're strengthening this law. And I just am concerned that this amendment would be weakening the overall purpose of the bill, but I look forward to hearing other discussion on it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Champion yield?
Senator Champion will yield. Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and Senator Champion, I'm looking at your amendment, and the words planning to operate a motor vehicle on line 2.1, could you explain to me what conditions that would arrive at planning to operate, not planning to operate a motor vehicle? What would that cover?
Thank you, Senator Limmer. Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Limmer. To the line specifically that you're referring to is not planning to operate or planning to operate a motor vehicle. It's simply because it's inoperable and the vehicle is no longer available because they had to, sell it because they cannot afford it. So therefore, they are not operating any vehicle at all. And so they want to notify the commissioner of such. Thank you, Senator Limmer.
Senator Limmer.
Mr. President, thank you, Senator Champion. These are people who have had experience drinking and driving. Oftentimes, or sometimes, people fall back to their old ways. When we're considering the wording, not planning to operate a motor vehicle, as it's written on line 2.1, what about the other condition? Let's not focus on the inoperation of a motor vehicle, but quite honestly, people who get drunk don't always do things quite like how they intended or planned. And that's what's troubling to the language that I see on lines 2.1. People who may go out and get drunk again don't always do things quite like they intended or planned. So quite honestly, I think this is an opening where maybe unintended, but nevertheless could fit into this very language that you've written into the amendment. I'm very concerned about that. Can you alleviate my concern?
Senator Limmer, are you asking Senator
Yes.
Champion to yield? Senator Champion, will you yield? Senator Champion will yield. Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Limmer. Senator Limmer, this is not to undermine or create an opening for someone who is drinking or someone who goes back to their old ways. Not at all. In fact, this is really about those individuals and Minnesotans. In fact, I've had situations and cases where individuals, their car broke down and they could not they couldn't any longer get it fixed. And so this is that. This does not give those individuals an opportunity who says, I'm no longer going to do it. In fact, Senator Limmer, if someone goes back to their old ways, they're not supposed to drink and drive. They're not supposed to do any of those things that are a problem. And so I just want you to know that this is not about individuals who are using and that they do not have to demonstrate it. In fact, if you look, Senator Limmer, lines 2.10 to 2.15, that you will see if the person is required by law to abstain from the use of alcohol or controlled substances, the commissioner shall provide the person with a method of documenting this during the period of program suspension other than by use of an ignition interlock device. So this is to make sure that people are still required to demonstrate that they've been abstinent from drugs. So this is not just to give them a way out. So thank you. Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Senator Champion. Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Latz yield?
Senator Latz will yield. Senator Limmer.
Thank you. Senator Latz, you might know that I'm a big fan of your particular bill before us today. I am a little concerned about the A2 amendment. I know that you've been listening to the discussion between myself, the President, and Senator Champion about the concern I have on lines 2.1, and I was wondering if you share the same concern that I do.
Senator Latz.
Mr. President and Senator Limmer, thank you for that question. First of all, I'm informed that the Department of Public Safety does not have any concerns about this particular amendment. The other thing that I would say is that this does not green light violating any other laws surrounding driving without valid license. If someone is still required to drive only a vehicle with ignition interlock in it and they drive a different vehicle, they're committing, under this bill, it'll be a gross misdemeanor crime, up from a misdemeanor level crime. So the underlying bill actually increases the penalty for that. If they're on probation still for any underlying criminal offense, they'd still be subject to all requirements of the court for complying with the conditions of their probation and could potentially face sanctions of substantial jail time if they don't comply. With all those other guardrails in place, I'm not concerned about the proposal that is in the A2 amendment, which basically just covers the question of administrative sanctions for not driving a vehicle in terms of the impact on the individual and the length of time that they would have to serve subsequently in any reinstated ignition interlock program. I'll give you an example of this. One of the reasons why I think this is valuable is that some people can get terminated from the program if they do some driving violations relating to alcohol consumption. And that's fine. They ought to be terminated from the program. But then they will, if they meet the requirements for reinstatement under the current provisions, even if they were, say, 9 years into the ignition interlock program of a 10-year requirement, that whole period of time would start all over again. Not that they've committed a new DWI or anything like that. The way this would be set up is they would not be facing a complete renewal of the length of that revocation, which would in itself become a substantial barrier to them even wanting to go back into the program, which means probably they'd be out there driving, but without the interlock in the device. And the main goal of this bill is to try to funnel people into the interlock program, not create more barriers for them to be in it.
Senator Limmer? All right, we're going to go to Senator Champion. Senator Champion.
Roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Members, we are on the A2 amendment. Further comments, amendments, discussion to the A2. Having said that, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Port votes aye.
Port votes aye.
Senator Fate votes aye.
Fate votes aye.
Senator Westland votes aye.
Westland votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
McEwen votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Marty votes aye.
And Senator Murphy votes aye.
Murphy votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Green votes no.
Senator Green votes no.
Senator Draheim votes no.
Senator Draheim votes no.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes aye.
Senator Carlson votes aye. All senators having voted who desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 39 yea votes and 28 nay votes, the amendment is adopted. Members, we are on the underlying bill as amended. Further commentary to the bill before we go to third reading? Seeing none, the Secretary will give it its third reading.
House File Number 2130, a bill for an act relating to public safety, extending the length of driver's license revocations related to certain offenses.
Third reading. Any other discussion on House File 2130 as amended? Okay, we will now have the Secretary take the roll on final passage as amended. Members, please vote. Senator Broden, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Fate votes aye.
Senator Fate votes aye.
Senator Westland votes aye.
Senator Westland votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
And Senator Carlson votes aye.
And Senator Carlson votes aye. Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Green votes aye.
Senator Green votes aye.
Senator Draheim votes aye.
Senator Draheim votes aye. The Secretary will close the roll. There have been 67 ayes and 0 nays. The bill is passed and its title agreed to. Members will now proceed to House File 2434. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we open today's session, I want to begin by acknowledging what a tremendously difficult year this has been. And for the people we serve, for our providers, and for each of us entrusted with the responsibility to govern wisely during times of uncertainty. This has not been a normal budget cycle, Mr. President. When we came to the realization of the looming deficit, we faced hard choices. And rather than pass the burden down the line, rather than relying on cost shifts to counties or gut critical disability services to fund other priorities, we made a conscious decision to take a different path. We recognize that everyone involved in human services, the state agencies, the providers, the counties, the advocates, and the legislators would all have to tighten their belts. This budget, Mr. President, was not written in a silo. This budget absolutely was built with a sense of a shared responsibility. We did not pit one group against another in this budget, Mr. President. We did not retreat to old patterns of dividing by need. Instead, we looked at the system as a whole with a commitment to preserve its integrity for the future. That's what we've been asked. And because these are terrible times, we know the fiscal outlook is uncertain, and the future of financing human services remains deeply unclear. But our response in this moment, Mr. President, speaks volumes. What we bring forward today is a budget that makes responsible reductions. $272 million in fiscal year 26-27 and $430 million in 27-28, while still upholding our duty to serve Minnesotans with dignity. We prioritized long-term stability over short-term wins. We listened, we adjusted, and we moved forward together. Mr. President, let's carry that spirit of collective stewardship into the work ahead. And with that, I give you the A32 amendment.
Senator Hoffman offers the A32 amendment. The Secretary will report the A32 amendment.
Senator Hoffman moves to amend House File Number 2434 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 2 after line 32, insert. This is the A32 amendment.
Senator Hoffman, to your A32 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And with that, there are technical corrections from the reviser because this had many stops and multiple conversations. There's the technical assistance from the Department of Human Services, and there's language there from the Minnesota Department of Health policy bill that is needed for some of the nursing facility languages in the budget bill. There's that intersectionality that occurs, Mr. President. The compromise language on the good senator from Minneapolis' Senate File 2055 that was worked out by the stakeholders is also in there too. That's Senator Fatah's bill. And then the sentence that clarifies one additional exception to the ICS setting approval moratorium, which, as you know, was funded from the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, or HUD. And we also, in conversations with this process, I want to thank Senator Drazkowski and Senator Lucero, the conversations we had about earmarks. In this amendment is the removal of earmarks, and the word competitive is in there that gives the Department of Human Services, they are the ones that are going to do the competitive grant process going forward. We were listening, and I just want to thank you two for bringing that to my attention. That also is the other amended works in there as well, Mr. President. So with that is the A32, so please vote green on it.
Senator Latz. Any other discussion? Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Hoffman yield for a question?
Senator Hoffman, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Hoffman. I'm looking at page 15, and when we're looking at transfer authority, and page 15, line 28 says, money appropriated for budget programs in this article may be transferred between budget programs and between years of the biennium with the approval of the Commissioner of Management and Budget. And I was wondering if Senator Hoffman could explain what that language does and why it's included here.
Senator Hoffman, to the question.
Mr. President, to that point, it's boilerplate language that's been in appropriations articles for years, so that is in there just giving the direction that it needs to go. Thank you.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Hoffman continue to yield?
Senator Hoffman, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Hoffman. Senator Hoffman, do you know for this transfer authority what does it apply to the entire appropriations article, or I'm trying to figure out what this would apply to? And I guess, Mr. President, just to highlight, I'm concerned that could this language effectively allow the administration to just move, all of these funds in the appropriations title, or is this restricted to, specific program areas?
Senator Rasmussen, if you give him a minute, he's getting your answer. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I understand the question correctly, if you look at that appropriations language, it's everything that's in there that authority is given according to the boilerplate language that we put in there, which is what's been used prior. I guess I need clarification. Would Senator Rasmussen yield for a question?
Senator Rasmussen, will you yield? Even though he has the floor, so I don't know if you want to ask him a clarifying question so that you're able to better answer, but Senator Rasmussen has the floor, Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It absolutely, this language is needed as the two agencies split. So Senator Rasmussen, you are part of the DCT conversation. So when you look at the two agencies that we're doing the split, what you do is this finalizes the split in July.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Hoffman just yield for one more question?
Senator Hoffman, the request is for you to yield for one more question. Will you yield? He will yield. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Hoffman. So this language here on the bottom of page 15, this is just about transferring funds between the Department of Human Services and direct care and treatment. Am I understanding that correctly?
Senator Hoffman, directly to the question.
Yes.
Senator Rasmussen. Any other questions? We are on the 832. Seeing none, all in favor of the 832, say aye. All those opposed say no. The 832 is adopted. Senator Hoffman. Anything else before I go on?
Mr. President, may I yield to the good senator from Anoka?
As a reminder, senators, we do not yield. We release the floor, and the president decides who goes next. But because of that request, I will go to Senator Abler. Senator Abler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did tell Senator Hoffman that we don't yield on the floor, and he thought that was funny. So, Mr. President, I'd like to move the A19 amendment.
Senator Abler moves the A19 amendment. The Secretary will report the Abler A19 amendment.
Senator Abler moves to amend House File Number 2434 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 23, line 24, before the, insert A. This is the A19 amendment.
Senator Abler, to your A19 amendment.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And there was some discussion yesterday about large-size amendments. This is a mere 27 pages. If you spend time in the Human Service Committee, 27 pages is like the beginning of an introduction to an omnibus bill. I want to thank Senator Hoffman for working with me. I also want to, before I get to it, I want to single out Liam Monahan and Kyle Raymond, who have just burnt the midnight oil on this amendment. And I think that when people digest it, they're going to see that it's worth every drop of sweat and loss of sleep that they suffered. But I'm just so grateful for their help on this. So, Mr. President, in the scheme of the three bills, there's one thing that particularly troubles me, of the three bills being the Governor House and then the Senate. The governor thought it was appropriate to shift $460 million of cost to the counties without any changes in doing any business any different way. In committee, there's a little bit of time here, Mr. President, so you might as well sit down. In the committee, we heard testimony about this county share, and the counties said 5 to 8% or more property tax increase because of that. And so as you watch this drama unfold with this human services bill and the suggestion that we can just have counties pay for things and it's going to be well balanced and good for Minnesota, I'm not sure how many Minnesotans can tolerate any more property tax increases put upon them in the name of good government. The House they thought that was such a good idea that they took $580 million as a county share, which I find to be quite an amazing amount. that I also do not support. Senator Hoffman had a challenge with his budget and so took the lesser of evils and has $192 million of county share in this amendment, and in the bill that's before us. The A19 amendment, Mr. President, will actually eliminate the county share and actually go beyond to actually give them a little relief. And so that's a highlight of this amendment. That we generate some money, Mr. President, by doing reform. And I'm going to go through a list of reforms that's somewhat lengthy in this amendment. Just by a topic, even the topic is 20 items. So I don't remember the latest number, somebody would, but it's a $20+ billion series of programs in our niche. And so there's efforts to do something different. There's two work groups, task forces, project areas in this bill that are going to go after cost savings and also reforming the processes that we have. And as a result of that, working with technical advice from the department, they agree that it's certainly possible that we could generate $135 million and $150 million in savings from those areas by 2029. And Mr. President, I believe that number to be actually pessimistic. I think there's much more savings than that. Even in some of the work this bill has done, we've found $50 million and more that's not been ascribed in savings. So that's where the money comes from, Mr. President. So what do we buy? I'm glad you asked. So we buy back the county share. So to the counties, there is no share. The position of the Senate is going to be, we do not believe we should tax our counties 1 penny more for the budget distress that the state is in. We also, there's something called the disproportionate share of assisted livings, where a number of sites have over 80% of their residents are elderly waiver and they can barely stay in business. This program sunsets in January. This reinstates that. There's a waiver called CADI that people may have heard about. This is what the governor has spent a great deal of time worrying about, the growth in it, and frankly, I totally agree. This is where you put anybody you can't figure out where else to put them, you put them into a CADI waiver. The growth has been 4,000 and 5,000 people a year, and they can then receive care and considerable care. They're supposed to be nursing home level of care, Mr. President, and in the bill, we define in a very humane, thoughtful way what that really is. And so that will make a difference. We also require, because it's been so overused, that the county supervisor will approve the addition of someone to the CADI waiver. Furthermore, we limit the growth in their annual spending to the CPI, and if it exceeds that, they can still get that, but then DHS has to approve that. That will make a huge dent. CADI will therefore serve people who need to be on a waiver who require this kind of care. There's a program called Min Choices, which is what you have to be screened by to get into one of these state programs or into a nursing home. They have a backlog that's crazy. And so we actually put some money into a state team to go offer assistance. We also offer training and process management in here to help Min Choices be improved. Also, Mr. President, to the point of arcane, it's paid for with a time study, which means that if you're working on something, a little dinger comes up on your email and you push a button. What are you working on? That's how we pay for this. It is so archaic, it actually fosters greater use of time and not less. In the bill, we're going to work on coming up with a capitated rate per evaluation. Currently, it's a range of $2,000 per Min Choice assessment, which I think is a ridiculous one. In this bill already, and in the policy bill that's coming, we allow that the counties can do more smaller assessments, one big one and then 2 little ones annually. That is actually going to save money. Mr. President, that's not reflected here. And in an effort to make sure this savings actually comes to pass, we ascribe an $18 million savings starting in 28 and 29 that will be realized. There's a program called Individualized Home Supports. It was reduced to 8 hours in both the governor's budget and this, and there's some argument that that's realistic. We increased that to 9 hours and also allow that individuals can access the other waiver programs if they need more services, just to create a discussion and conference about this. We do a waiver case management study. We do a licensing timeliness study. This big task force is going to study long-term services and supports. It's also going to discover cost savings. We also allow that the department can look into the counseling requirement under CFSS, which is a change from PCA. It's been a real bottleneck. And a shout out to Jameson Crawford, who kept bringing us to our attention. Jameson, we got it. We're going to try to work on this. There's not nearly enough counselors to go around, and some of them aren't that particularly experienced to be helpful. For the people that worry about homelessness, Wilder does a triennial, is that the right word, Mr. President, every 3 years, homelessness assessment. That's not funded anywhere. It's funded in here. We think it's an important thing to do to just actually know what is the state of the problem, and that's paid for in this bill. There is a program called Ivy House. We're trying to set up a residential hospice there. We set up a program called Community Care Hub, Mr. President, which is where we coordinate services across the board to people. This spends money, but I think in the long run it might save as much as $100 million. I'm almost done, Mr. President. For the people who care about spinal cord research, Jake Jablonski and others, this is a shout out to continue the Senate strong position in the Higher Ed Committee. We fully funded that for 3 years, $3 million through the 4-year program. The House actually, the other body only did it for 2 years. We put in this bill an additional $2 million, which may or may not wind up in this bill, but we wanted to point out that this is really important. And talking to Rob Wudlick, and God bless you, as another person who's interested in this, the chance of spinal cord research, Mr. President, is that these folks can walk again. And it's incredible. Now they have to work on optimization of these various programs, but we are getting to the point that people with a spinal cord injury who are in a chair, who can't even move their arms, will be able to walk around and live their life, which I think is amazing. And for Senator May Quaid, who so wanted to help us get the Miller Building going on the 48-hour rule question, Mr. President, we pay $75 million to build one. And so this bill really, I think, establishes the priorities of the Senate. And with that, Mr. President, I'll stand for questions, and I urge your yes vote. Thank you.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, will Senator Abler yield, please, Mr. President?
Senator Abler, will you yield? He will yield, Senator Hoffman.
So I got a series of questions for the good senator from Anoka, and the first one is this. We worked in collaboration on this 48-hour hold conversation, and we know that members just got sent out a piece of paper from the Sheriff's Association. We know the counties. And so, Senator Abler, is the Miller Building, would that have a direct impact on this conversation of the 48-hour hold?
Senator Abler, specifically to the question.
Sure. Mr. President, absolutely.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. And will the senator from Anoka yield again?
Will you yield again, Senator from Anoka? He will. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. And another question is, and help me understand, if I read your amendment right, Senator Abler, the Minnesota Senate is actually providing tax protections to citizens in the state of Minnesota. Did I read that right?
Senator Abler.
Thank you, Mr. President.
To the question.
But for this amendment, and which will be hopefully become the position of the Senate, we would be the only one guarding against that. And Mr. President, I hope that the Senate stands firm on that because of all the challenges, that we do not provide any property tax increases to our citizens. Thank you.
Senator Hoffman.
Mr. President, to my point, that is a huge piece of assumption that is absolutely wonderful to hear, that we know our county-based work that is done within the health and human services world, in this case human services, to be able to say that we are protecting the work that the counties are doing by not increasing taxes on the local tax base is wonderful. We're doing tax work right here in human services. Members, please vote green on this amendment.
Senator Rasmussen, to the A19.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I rise in support and am very grateful for the work that Senator Abler and others have done on putting together this amendment. One of the big concerns that I hear from my constituents is property tax increases. especially for Minnesotans who are on a fixed income, that property tax increase might be the difference between them being able to stay in their home versus having to sell and leave their home. And unfortunately, when we saw the governor's budget proposal, he had $460 million in county cost shifts just within this committee's jurisdiction. And we heard in committee that that could increase county property taxes anywhere from 5 to 10%. Mr. President, we had the Human Services Director for one of the counties that I represent come down to the Capitol and say that for Traverse County, which is the lowest population county in the state, the cost of the governor's proposal would be almost $300 per household per year in property tax increase. So this has been a priority for us, and I'm really glad that Senator Abler has brought a solution to remove about $150 million in county cost shifts that are currently in the bill with his amendment. I'm also grateful, Mr. President, for the work done on direct care and treatment. And for those who don't know what direct care and treatment does, they are charged with caring for individuals who are committed to the state. It's everything from the Minnesota Sex Offender Program to some of our substance use disorder programs and others across the state that do really important work that help improve the lives and safety of Minnesotans. And unfortunately, we have seen Governor Walz repeatedly in his budget proposals have no real plan to increase capacity at direct care and treatment. And many members have probably heard from their county sheriffs, from local hospitals about the stress that that has put on local resources. I had a constituent who was featured in the Star Tribune for spending more than 100 days in a county jail waiting to get into a mental health facility that was operated by the state. 100 days in seclusion in a county jail when he's been diagnosed with a serious mental illness. And so I'm really glad as well that Senator Abler's amendment makes a real investment in expanding capacity into the future, because that's what we need if we're going to take care of the charge that direct care and treatment has. And so, Mr. President, really appreciate the bipartisan work that's gone into this amendment. I think it responds to the priorities that we've heard from Minnesotans that are concerned about their property taxes, from public safety officials who are concerned around a lack of capacity at direct care and treatment, and I think will send a strong signal around the priorities of Minnesotans.
Any other discussion on the A19? Senator Bowden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I support Senator Abler's amendment, but I think it could be just a little bit better. So with that, I would offer the A23.
Senator Bowden offers the A23, which is an amendment to the amendment. The Secretary will report the A23 amendment to the amendment.
Senator Bolden moves to amend the A19 amendment to House File Number 2434 as follows. Page 24, after line 1, insert. This is the A23 amendment to the amendment.
Senator Bowden, to your A23 amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I have been in conversation with Senator Abler and Senator Hoffman about this and thank them for their collaboration. This amendment is related to a bill that I carried in collaboration with the Rare Disease Advisory Council regarding and in connection with newborn infant screening, which we know is one of the most successful public health programs in the United States, and Minnesota is a leader in newborn screening, and it saves countless lives, averting significant health care costs. In recent years, medical advances have allowed the addition of rare diseases that were once out of reach in medicine. But many of these diseases are aggressively degenerative, and early intervention when children are pre-symptomatic for the diseases are necessary for that treatment to be effective. So finding a more expedited process for disability determination is in line with our state's newborn screening program's commitment to early identification and timely follow-up. So this amendment would direct DHS, and this language has been worked out and agreed upon with DHS, would allow them to make expedited determination for a small category of diseases that are screened for that require this crucial early intervention. So this allows that faster process by DHS to be sure that we are getting the care and treatment to these newborns when it can still be effective for them. So would ask for member support and would ask for a roll call. Thank you, Mr.
Roll
President.
call requested, roll call granted. Senator Hoffman to the A23 amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this absolutely, members remember, senators, when we had this bill in front of Finance, Senator Pratt brought this amendment forward, and it caused a lot of discussion. And of course, Senator Pratt was on the Finance Committee, which was a lengthy discussion. Senator Bolden, thank you for working together and taking the Senator Pratt's and your work and then getting the technical assistance needed. And thank you for reaching out with Senator Abler and I. This is great. Vote green, Senator Abler.
Senator Abler.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And I think this is a great amendment. We had testimony in this in our committee. If you want to, for the people that need to soften their hearts, they need to come to our committee. Actually, this is in the Health Committee, I think. But the testimonies of the individuals, the parents that suddenly discover their child has something they've never heard of before, and they go down a path. If we can get this going quicker, then some of these children, young infants, can actually maybe be improved in some way, but at least they can live. And so this is an example of what good things can happen. And just on a grander scale, Mr. President, this amendment in its total is $310 million worth or something. Not a penny of new money, using the money we have in a better way to do stuff like this by streamlining these programs, which this bill, the amendment attempts to do. We can afford to do things that we really want to do. So members, vote yes twice if you can. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the A23 amendment to the amendment? Senator Bowden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I remove my request for a roll call.
Roll call request removed. All in favor of the A23 amendment to the amendment say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. The A23 amendment to the amendment is adopted. Members, we are on the underlying A19 as amended. Any other discussion before we proceed? I don't understand when folks are pointing that way, so if you can let me know what you want to do, that would be very helpful. Anyone else wants to speak to the A19 as amended? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The A19 as amended has been adopted. Senator Abler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have another amendment. What number is it? The A1. Wow, how about that? I'd like to move the A1 amendment, Mr. President. Thanks.
Senator Abler offers the A1 amendment. The Secretary will report the A1 amendments.
Senator Abler moves to amend House File Number 2434 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 38, delete Section 6 and insert. This is the A1 amendment.
Senator Abler to your A1 amendment.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I just need a couple minutes to describe this. The last amendment that we had addressed one of the big concerns the governor expressed in his budget discussions, and as he was putting his budget together, he kind of layered over the whole disability system to deal with the problem in the caddy waiver, the amendment you just approved, and thank you for that. Actually does a laser-like focus on how to make that work better and serve the people in a better way. The second thing he brought up was concern about autism and treatments for that. We've established a program called the Early Intensive Developmental Behavioral Intervention Program, which we fought a long time to get, starting in 2013 or something like that. Took forever to get it off the ground. Mr. President, in the same way as the rare disease people, the families that come forward, some of those can actually be changed markedly with early intervention. The same thing with the individuals with autism. And so we set up a program. There's probably 15,000 and maybe 20,000 young people who could benefit by this program. And we're not serving all of them. And in the beginning, it was only 1,000 a year, and then they aged through, and it's too bad. But over the course of that, Mr. President, the program got kind of soft. The commissioner used the term fuzzy in Commissioner Harpstead, just to remember her. Hi, Commissioner Harpstead. used the term fuzzy describing the operations of some of these operations. And the governor brought forward a plan with $12 million of biennium to license these individuals. This is a version of that, worked in concert with the Representative Hicks, who actually was one of the few EIDBI workers at the Department of Human Services, to actually find a way to regulate and rein in some of the fraud and the waste that is coming out of this. And so many parts are similar to the base bill, and I won't bother with that, but where the changes come is this allows the department immediately, it sets up a provisional licensure, which will start next year, and then in 2 years, there's going to be a work group that's going to bring back results about how to make a permanent licensure thing, talking about things of privacy and site quality and billing practices and so on. But that's too much to do this year. This actually sets up a provisional license, which the providers will have to do. It sets up some minimum standards for supervision. It talks about there has to be every 3 months. There's an in-person visit by the supervisor. Mr. President, in some cases, the individuals who are supervising these $200,000, some cases, never actually meets the individual there. It's all by telehealth, and so we think that's not appropriate, and so we make them come to deal with that. At some point later, we'll decide how many they each can serve, but this is a really good start. In the short term, what it's going to do is DHS will be allowed to make unannounced visits and to deal with issues that they can find at that time. If they see maltreatment, currently they can't address maltreatment unless somebody, the county attorney or somebody, we're going to let them deal with that issue and quality of service. And so, Mr. President, this is getting close to where it's going to land, but it's a great step forward. In the Senator Hoffman's bill, we reduced the staff in half from 36 to 18, I think it was. I'm not convinced we've eaten that much, but we're going to talk about that. If there's questions about the background studies, which they now have to do, and timelines for that, we need to sort that out. But Mr. President, it is a really good work. And what this is going to do, it's going to, eventually I think this is even save us some money, even in this cycle. But I'm really proud of it, and I want to thank all the people that have had their hand in this. And thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hoffman to the A1 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And, you know, the previous amendment, the A19, which this is going on to, reminded me of my famous band, Steely Dan. I just, every time you hit that, Mr. President. But like a band, it took a group of people to make that music. And in this case, another person from the other body, Representative Hicks, worked in collaboration. And then, like Senator Abler said, this is a continuation of the work. And I am absolutely honored that you jumped back on this when you said we need to really work together on that. You had providers that were part of this discussion. You had folks that were there. And I just want to say thank you for the collaboration on this one. So members, please vote green on this amendment.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I appreciate Senator Abler's work on this. This is becoming a really important topic, Mr. President and members, and there are some great autism service providers out in the state, and I've had a chance to see some of the amazing work that they do with young people with autism and the impact that it can have on their life. But, Mr. President, we're having FBI agents raiding some of these centers because of suspected fraud. And we saw just in a 5-year period, the number of providers for this service have increased by 700%, and the public dollars expended have increased by 3,000%. We need to make sure that we have a framework to go after fraud, to ensure that the dollars are going to the kids who need these services and need the help. And I really appreciate Senator Abler's work to make sure that happens. So I'll also be supporting the amendment.
Any other discussion on the A1 amendment? Senator Abler.
Well, thanks. Just a final thing I wanted to talk to about the providers. And Mr. President, this is a really important amendment, but we're not belaboring it. As this has been designed, my philosophy of regulation of a group is you try to find, where the 70 percentile line is and people above that line, design it so that they're not impacted. I believe that this amendment will not impact anybody who is a truly quality provider and doing the right thing. And there may be some minor things in this every 3-month in-person thing. We're pretty stubborn about that, Mr. President, because they really should have the oversight. But the providers are watching, and so if there's some heartburn you get about something, we're going to say, no, I'm sorry, we're keeping that. But we want it to work, and when you regulate, you don't want to overload the people who are doing good work now. So that's all I got, Mr. President, and please vote green. Thank you.
All in favor of the A1 Abler Amendment, say aye. All those opposed, say no. The motion prevails. The A1 is adopted. Senator Grudenhagen.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And members, I have the A30 amendment.
Senator Grudenhagen offers the A30 amendment. The Secretary will report the A30 amendment.
Senator Grudenhagen moves to amend House File Number 2434 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 24, delete sections 18 to 21. This is the A30 amendment.
Senator Grudenhagen to your A30 amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. And I hope this is seen as a friendly amendment. Basically what it does, it repeals Minnesota Care for illegal immigrants, spends that money on repealing the 4% cap for our nursing homes. So we move the money that we're spending on illegal immigrants for Minnesota Care, and we fund our nursing homes. With the youngest of the baby boomers approaching retirement, nursing homes in Minnesota will even be more in demand. We should be providing the resources that keep nursing homes available and open and financially sound, not covering benefits for those who have broken the law. Members, if you haven't followed the enrollment for Minnesota Care by illegals, I'll give you a refresher. Minnesota Management and Budget projected 5,874 illegal immigrants signing up for Minnesota Care in 2025 at a cost of $7,741 per participant. What actually happened? In the first 3 months that the law took effect, January 1, 2025, Minnesota Care has enrolled 17,396 illegal immigrants in Minnesota Care at a cost of $134,700,000 approximately, compared to the projected annual return of $44,800,000. So the other thing about this, because of the federal law, we do not get any federal match on Minnesota Care to cover these expenses, all right? So the result is it is paid 100% by Minnesota taxpayers without any type of help from the federal government, which is appropriate. At the rate that enrollment is going, we will soon, in the next few years, be over $600 million, 100% paid for by Minnesota taxpayers for illegal immigrant benefits or health care benefits. Now, this does not include education. It doesn't include a host of other areas where we're also spending money. So the result was, if that same money was moved to our nursing homes, which is what this amendment does, we'd get a 1-to-1 match. In other words, we'd double our money for our nursing homes. So basically, under the current Senate proposal of the run that I have, just in my district, we're going to reduce or cut nursing homes. In Cokato, it's going to be, over the next 4 years, it's going to be $1,154,000. In Glencoe, we're going to cut $5,800,000, almost $900,000. Hutchinson is another $1,348,000. And I could go on. Now, members, this applies to every nursing home in your district. You're going to cut millions of dollars under the latest run I have here for the Senate, and then we turn around and we provide 100% coverage under Minnesota Care for illegals. I think we should care more about the citizens of Minnesota than we do the illegal immigrants. So, Senator Hoffman, I hope that you will see this as a friendly amendment.
Senator Hoffman to the A30 Grudenhagen amendment.
Mr. President, 35.1, actually, if you look at subject and purpose, really? Really? It's not germane.
It appears that Senator Hoffman has raised a point of order under 35.1. 35.1 is an amendment proposed to the Senate or the Committee of the Whole that is not germane, is out of order. Did you want to speak?
Advice, Mr. President.
No advice. Well, I will give you just one moment, and then I'm going to confer. Senator Grudenhagen.
Yeah, obviously the bill deals with nursing homes and the funding of it, or the reduction of it that we're giving. So I hope you will find that the point of order is not well taken. It is germane to the bill, and my concern is that there's certain people that don't want to vote on this and be recorded on what is actually taking place here in the Senate. So please find the point of order not well taken, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Grudenhagen. Give me a minute. The point of order is well taken.
Mr. President.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appeal the ruling of the President and request a roll call. And
Roll call requested, roll call granted. A green vote upholds the ruling of the President, and a red vote is against the ruling of the President. The Secretary will take the roll.
Mr. President, advice to the body.
Sorry about that, Senator Rasmussen. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a choice with this bill. And right now, we have hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts to disability services and nursing homes. And we have seen that even though the governor has proposed $1 billion in cuts to Minnesota nursing homes and disability services, that Governor Walz and Minnesota Democrats have refused to cut one dime from taxpayer-funded health care for illegal immigrants. And so, Mr. President and members, this is the opportunity. If you vote red, we get to have this debate around the real trade-offs that Minnesotans are facing. And I think it's important that we listen to Minnesotans. And during this time, they're asking us to put their families first, to put their family budgets first. And Senator Grudenhagen made a great point on the federal match. By redirecting the dollars that are going towards Minnesota Care for illegal immigrants, we can double the impact. We can reduce and eliminate the cuts to nursing homes that are in this bill, and so I'd recommend a red vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Members, let me give you a reminder, because we're getting off what is before the body, and I'm not going to let us do that today. The issue before the body is whether this is germane, not to the merits. We are not to argue the merits of any other bill or anything else. It is only to the germaneness of this bill. That is what is being appealed. So if you go off script, I'm going to go a different direction. So I just thought I would give this gentle reminder because Senator Rasmussen went beyond what is before the body, but I wanted to caution us. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, I have two concerns that with the ruling that I'd like to bring before the body. One, Senator Hoffman raised a concern around 35.1, but didn't really talk about the reasons in 35.2 why he didn't feel it was germane. And doing a quick search of the bill, there is a reference to Chapter 256L, which I believe makes the amendment germane and part of the bill and part of the subject that we are talking about, and why I believe, Mr. President, that we should, in fact, overrule your decision. Thank you.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. President. To the motion, the part of the reason why this amendment is not germane is because it takes money from another committee's budget target and tries to give it to this committee, and you can't do that. And so I urge members to vote green to uphold the ruling of the president because this is so far outside of what we're allowed to do with amendments.
Senator Grudenhagen, only to the germaneness issue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I would just say that the bill deals with nursing home and its funding. If I remember right, we passed a housing bill, and then we went back and took money from it to fund something else. So, we have set precedent on that. And the thing is that what we're really talking about is to overrule the president and care for our most vulnerable. That's what we're talking about. And I would strongly encourage members, because I don't know what you're going to do when you go back to your district and tell them that you funded illegal health care over
Senator
your nursing
Gruenhagen,
homes.
I gave
Thank
you
you, Mr.
some
President.
specific instructions. Thank you. The secretary will take the roll on whether the decision of the president should be upheld or not. A green vote, as you know, represents upholding the ruling of the president, and a red vote goes against the ruling of the president. Senator Westland, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
Senator Klein votes aye.
Senator Klein votes aye.
Senator Kunesh votes aye.
Senator Kunesh votes aye.
And Senator Zhang votes aye.
And Senator Zhang votes aye.
I'm sorry, and Lindsay Port is also an aye. Thank you.
Senator Port votes aye. Senator Jasinski, those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Lang votes no, and we have one more member waiting.
Senator Lang votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Matthews votes no.
Senator Matthew votes no. All senators having voted, the secretary will close the roll. There being 34 ayes and 33 noes, the decision of the president is upheld. Senator Urke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, as we've heard from the very introduction of the bill this afternoon, that this bill is about the people we serve and the hard choices that had to be made. Whether we're here, we read our emails, take our phone calls, or go back home, we hear about what these proposals do to our disability service providers and everybody involved in it. It has been constant since the very first governor's proposal was released. Concerns were huge, concerns were everywhere. We have funding reductions in the day services, funding reductions in residential services, everything related to those that serve our disability communities, those that provide services to those that need it the most. Currently, I'm already hearing feedback from our providers. I've had staff contact me. They've already lost their job because of some of these proposals. And people that work in this industry, this healthcare, are in it because of their loyalty to serve the clients they serve, and they're just total humanitarian efforts about serving people with disabilities. So far, we've heard Senator Abler talk about county shifts. He had amendments to address that because our counties are concerned. Senator Gruenhagen's just talked about our nursing homes and their concerns. I have another concern in that's those with high disability priorities, those with high priorities that they are fully funded. We still have rate exceptions for those that have needs that exceed the amounts allowed based on their assessments. And with that, Mr. President, I would offer the A29 amendment.
Senator Uckey offers the A29 amendment. The Secretary will report the A29 amendment.
Senator Rutke moves to amend House File Number 2434 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 92, delete Section 44. This is the A29 amendment.
Senator Uckey to your A29 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The A29 helps those with the most acute disabilities get the care they need. We know that there are many people out there that have great needs, and we have not been able to reach and fulfill those needs. And with what we're proposing and what we're seeing, those needs are not being met financially either. So with that, Mr. President and members, to meet that additional spending, that additional funding, we're looking to take and repeal the Minnesota Care for Illegals, transfer that money in to serve Minnesotans, and do what we're mandated to do. We need to take care of Minnesotans first, and that's why I would ask everybody for a green vote. Thank you.
Senator Hoffman to the A29 amendment.
Mr. President, the same response I had last time really is the same response this time, and the same germaneness response I had last time is the same one this time. Senator Uckey, I absolutely appreciate your work, but on this one, I got to disagree with you on that one. So thank you, Mr. President. It is not germane. Same argument. Thank you.
Mr. President, advice?
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President.
To the issue.
Mr. President, I would just remind the President that 265L is referenced in the bill. This goes to 265L and should be considered germane.
The point of order is well taken.
Mr. President.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appeal the ruling of the President and request a roll call and would like to offer advice.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Brief advice. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would again recommend a red vote to overturn the ruling of the President. This is germane to human services because it's impacting the lives of Minnesotans. And we have hundreds of millions of dollars in disability services cuts in this bill, and we have the opportunity to alleviate those cuts for Minnesota families with disabilities by redirecting the dollars in Minnesota Care for Illegal Immigrants to these priorities within the bill. Would recommend a no vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would recommend to uphold the ruling of the President. This, again, takes money from a different committee jurisdiction and tries to spend it in this bill, which we cannot do. So I would uphold the ruling of the President and keep it not germane.
Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, I would urge members to support the amendment and overturn the ruling of the President. As you've heard, 265L is in this bill, which is what this amendment is affecting. And it's a matter of priorities. And where do we fund? Do we support our disabled services in Minnesota, or do we continue to fund illegal aliens' health care? That's the question. It is in the bill. I urge us to overturn the President.
The Secretary will take the roll on the appeal. Remember, a green vote represents upholding the ruling of the President, and a red vote is votes against the ruling of the President. Senator Westland, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
Senator Klein votes aye.
Senator Klein votes aye.
Senator Zhang votes aye.
Senator Zhang votes aye.
And Senator Latz votes aye.
And Senator Latz votes aye. Senator Zazinski. Those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Lang votes no.
Senator Lang votes no. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There being 34 ayes and 32 noes, the decision of the president is upheld. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to offer the A50.
Senator Rasmussen offers the A50 amendment. The secretary will report the A50 amendment.
Senator Rasmussen moves to amend House File Number 2434 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 243, after line 21, insert. This is the A50 amendment.
Senator Rasmussen, to your A50 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The A50 amendment comes in response to a committee hearing that we had in the Senate Human Services Committee, where we had the legislative auditor come and present on findings that their office has found within the human services area. And as a part of the dialogue, Mr. President, one of the things that became apparent, one challenge that we have in going after waste, fraud, and abuse within the human services space is that agencies, even when they get a recommendation from the Office of the Legislative Auditor, oftentimes those recommendations are not implemented. They're not acted on. And I believe the OLA does fantastic work in highlighting opportunities to improve how our state agencies function and protect taxpayer dollars. And so the A50 amendment would simply require the Department of Human Services to issue an annual report detailing whether they have implemented the recommendations identified by the OLA in the prior 5 years. I think this is a simple measure to ensure that the agency is giving the legislature the information we need to see if they're implementing these recommendations. I would ask for member support and request a roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Senator Hoffman to the A50 amendment.
Go ahead. I'll take it as a friendly amendment.
He would take it as a friendly amendment. Would you, Senator Rasmussen?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would withdraw the request for a roll call.
Roll call withdrawn. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, if Senator Rasmussen would yield.
Senator Rasmussen, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and Senator Rasmussen, this looks like familiar language. Is this the same language as legislation that you had proposed earlier in the year and had some interaction with Senator Rest on the subject?
Senator Rasmussen, specifically to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Dibble. This is different language, but it's related. This is focused specifically on the Department of Human Services and only puts a requirement on the agency to respond to recommendations that they've received from the OLA. My previous bill that I offered as an amendment on the state government bill was more encompassing, and it actually had requirements for the Office of the Legislative Auditor. This is just making sure we get a report back from DHS on their progress on recommendations or lack thereof.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that, Senator Rasmussen. I understand the chief author has taken this as a friendly amendment, and so I always follow my chair's lead, always. But I will just note that we'll probably have members of the Audit Commission who will take some interest and probably want to have some more opportunity to take a look at this as we move to the next step in the deliberative process. Thank you, Mr. President.
All those in favor of the A50 say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the A50 Rasmussen amendment is adopted. Senator Grudenhagen.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I'd like to offer the A24 amendment.
Senator Grudenhagen offers the A24 amendment. The secretary will report the A24 amendment.
Senator Grudenhagen moves to amend House File Number 2434 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 245, line 28, delete $7,764,972,000. This is the A24 amendment.
Senator Gruenhagen to your A24 amendment.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Members, this particular amendment, actually, it comes out of the governor's recommendation or budget, and what it amounts to is to pay for program integrity AI infrastructure technology tools by prorating all existing ongoing grant funding in the DHS budget. In other words, we just take a haircut from some of those areas to pay for this. The government needs to get smarter with its resources, and spending money on AI to help improve program integrity is an important way that we can crack down on fraud. We are giving each base grant a small haircut to provide program integrity that will help save the state money from fraudulent actors in the future. Members, Mr. President, and members, we have $611 million in the last several years that is actually charged, individuals have been charged with waste, fraud, and abuse here in the state. According to the information I have, it's well over $1 billion when you take it into concern or take into consideration frontline workers, COVID money, and I could go on. So members, even the federal government said we have a fraud problem. In fact, the Star Tribune at the beginning of this session carried an article saying Minnesota should be united, Democrats and Republicans and Governor Walz, on addressing fraud. And yet, when I look at the HHS budgets, where a lot of the fraud has happened, I don't see the governor's proposal being implemented. So this amendment would actually provide for that, and I think pay for itself more than over again by catching and alerting agencies to waste, fraud, and abuse. So members, I hope you will support this, and I hope that Senator Hoffman would see this as a friendly amendment.
Senator Hoffman to the A24 Gruenhagen amendment.
Mr. President, will the good senator from Glencoe, Minnesota yield, please?
Senator Gruenhagen, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Hoffman.
So, Mr. President, Senator Gruenhagen, if I recall right, the body just heard you talk about we're cutting services from human services and we're cutting services. Yet, if you could please explain to me on your section 24, beginning in lines 2.16 all the way to 2.20, where it says, and I quote, human services must reduce the grants aging and adult services grants, deaf, blind, and hard of hearing grants, disability grants. Help me understand that because I'm having a little conflict of something here. So, Senator, please, thank you.
Senator Gruenhagen, specifically to the question. Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Senator Hoffman and Mr. President. Yeah, we are taking a haircut on some of these areas, and it's to provide, it's provide more concern and oversight on waste, fraud, and abuse with modern technology. I watched a video on this, a training video on how to discover waste, fraud, and abuse in government, and one of the things that they brought out is that unless you have the software inside the computer, it's very hard to track, that alerts you and to track where the money's going, that it's difficult to catch and be alerted early to waste, fraud, and abuse. So I do think this amendment would actually save money that would more than cover any reductions that we're making right now. And again, what's been charged so far in the last several years is $611 million. If that money had been caught early, and we'd even saved half of that, we'd be more than we'd have over $300 million to apply to our nursing homes, our disabled, assisted living, and a host of other critical areas for our adults. So that's what it does.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, good senator from Glencoe, for that. I'm having a hard time with cutting 8.5% in disability services. Having said that, Mr. President and members, I would ask people to vote no on this amendment, and I would request a roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. And And as former U.S. Attorney Lugar said, Minnesota has a fraud problem. We've seen just in the time that since Governor Walz first took office, more than $500 million in documented fraud. And much of that was within the human services space. I was at the governor's State of the State address here recently, and the loudest applause line that he got is when he acknowledged that we have a fraud problem here in Minnesota and that there's bipartisan interest in addressing it. And one of the tools that the governor spoke about at his State of the State address was this AI technology that will help our agencies identify patterns of potential fraud and to make sure that we're going after people who are stealing from Minnesota taxpayers. I think this is a very common sense amendment. We can think about other ways to pay for it in conference committee, but I don't think we can have a human services bill leave this floor without looking at bipartisan proposals to address waste, fraud, and abuse. So I'd encourage members to vote yes.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I'm going to urge a no vote in part because while there is bipartisan support to address fraud against government programs, that's fraud against us, it's fraud against our beloved state workers who work in these programs. Nothing in this amendment gets us any closer to that. When you're going to develop a bill to actually address fraud against government programs, it would require deep work with the agencies who are having fraud perpetrated against them to understand their software and their programming and who administers it and where they're seeing it. And none of that is present here. In fact, this is so vague. Case management software to detect and prevent fraud in the medical assistance program. How would we implement this at an agency? Who is this money going to go to? And how did we get to this number? $2.768 million and $3.19 in future years. What is it for? How are they going to report back? Do we do upgrades? Do we do AI? Should this go to minute? These are a lot of questions, and it's why it should be a bill and not an amendment on the fly, on the floor, because we'd just be taking money, and I just want to go back to Senator Hoffman's earlier point, to reduce grants to deaf, blind, hard of hearing, disability grants, behavioral health grants, and aging and adult services to go to a very vague line that we don't know if they're going to have deliverables. We don't know if we're going to see savings. We need to do a lot more work. This is not even close to ready for prime time, and I urge members to vote no.
Any other discussion before we go to the author of the amendment before we vote? The last voice we will hear now will be that of Senator Gruenhagen, and then we will vote because a roll call was requested. Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, again, this amendment is what was in the governor's budget recommendation. And again, based on my research, and please do your own, unless you get software like a bank does, like for instance, just to give you an example, I made a larger payment to a vendor I normally didn't do. Well, I took it right directly out of my checking account. Well, all of a sudden I got a notice on my phone that a fraud alert, and I had to respond to that to allow that charge to go through. And yet, and again, in talking to the department, a lot of their technology is old and more difficult to use. And by the way, I did do some checking at the county level also. And they're using DOS systems. So, I mean, we need a lot of updating on our technology in order to detect this type of fraud. And look at the track record. 611 million charged and over $1 billion that's been identified. So, members, if you want to support the governor's recommendation, please vote green on this proposal. Thank you.
Secretary, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The Secretary will take the roll on the A24 Gruenhagen Amendment. Senator Westland, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Port votes no.
Senator Port votes no.
Senator McEwen votes no.
Senator McEwen votes no.
Senator Marty votes no.
Senator Marty votes no.
Senator Murphy votes no.
Senator Murphy votes no.
Senator Klein votes no.
Senator Klein votes no.
Senator Zhang votes no.
Senator Jean votes no.
Senator Latz votes no.
Senator Latz votes no. Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Lang votes aye.
Senator Lang votes aye. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There being 32 ayes and 34 noes, the A24 Grutenhagen Amendment is not adopted. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to offer the A52.
Senator Rasmussen offers the A52 amendment. The secretary will report the A52 amendment.
Senator Rasmussen moves to amend House File Number 2434 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 245, line 28, delete. This is the A52 amendment.
Senator Rasmussen to your A52 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The bill before the body has hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts to Minnesota nursing homes. And I looked at just the area that I represent has more than $14 million in projected cuts over 4 years with this bill in front of the body. So, Mr. President, the A52 is designed to try to help soften the blow to Minnesota's nursing homes. Last biennium, there was a loan program set up for nursing homes in distress. But, Mr. President, one of the challenges is that a nursing home that's in financial distress doesn't necessarily need or want more debt, and oftentimes it actually doesn't improve their situation. And that's one of the reasons that we have seen low usage of this $100 million loan program. So the A52 would take unencumbered dollars within that loan program and redirect it to the critical access nursing facility program that's already in this bill that goes to our nursing homes that are most in need of closure. Oftentimes those are in rural areas where if that nursing home closes, you could have seniors needing to move up to an hour away to find another nursing home. And so I think this is a common sense way to help soften the blow that this bill will have for Minnesota nursing homes, and I'd ask for member support.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. And guess what? This makes sense. It goes to the critical access nursing funds of the unspent. Nice work on this, good senator from Fergus Falls. Thank you. Vote yes.
Any other discussion on the A52? Seeing none, all in favor of adoption of the A52, say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the A52 Rasmussen amendment is adopted. Senator Fateh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to offer the A33 amendment.
Senator Fateh offers the A33 amendment. The secretary will report the A33 amendment.
Senator Fateh moves to amend House File Number 2434 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 228, delete Section 5 and insert. This is the A33 amendment.
Senator Fateh to your A33 amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. This was also discussed in committee previously. The amendment is intended to help improve resident safety and quality of care in licensed assisted living facilities by streamlining the process for the Minnesota Department of Health to utilize the fines collected from providers. The current law requires that Home Care Assisted Living Advisory Council to make recommendations to MDH on how to use the funds each year, but unfortunately, there has been some disagreement among the group and they struggle to identify and how to use it, and as a result, the funds have been accumulating year over year. The amendment would create a competitive grant program for providers or organizations to improve resident quality of care and outcomes in assisted living facilities. And those eligible for the grants must have experience in assisted living operation, compliance, and best practices to best support the providers. The amendment would allow MDH to appropriate the funds either to individual providers looking to make permanent improvements to their facility for compliance, with licensed laws or to outside organizations who might provide training to providers who are experts in public health, dementia, behavioral health, or other relevant issues. We heard this in committee. Senator Hoffman had us go back and do our homework to engage with the stakeholders, RPMN, long-term care imperative, and MDH all okay with this. And I urge that folks vote yes. Also to mention that this would have no general fund cost as it's drafted.
Senator Hoffman to the A33 amendment.
Will Senator Fate yield, please?
Senator Fate, will you yield? He will yield.
Yes.
Senator Hoffman.
Mr. President, does the Disabler caucus support this amendment?
Senator Fate.
Yes, the Disabler caucus does support.
Senator Hoffman.
Mr. President, I strongly support a yes on this. Thank you very much.
Any other discussion on the A33? Seeing none, all in favor of adoption of the A33, say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the A33 Fate amendment is adopted. Any other amendments? Senator Maquay.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would impose a call of the Senate.
The Senate is under call. Senator McQuaid, you want to wait a little longer? You certainly can. Senator McQuaid, is this for the duration of the bill?
Thank you, Mr. President. It's for the duration of the upcoming amendment.
Okay. Members, if you're sitting in the chambers, will you please hit your button because you are under call. Senator Nelson? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and the Sergeant at Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would offer the A34 amendment.
The A34 amendment is being offered, and the Secretary will report the A34 amendment.
Senator Meekwade moves to amend House File Number 2434 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 115 after line 18, insert. This is the A34 amendment.
Senator McQuaid to your A34 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is an amendment that we had seen before related to prohibiting businesses, corporations, partnerships, government entities, healthcare providers for sharing identifiable information, names, birth dates, addresses, telephone numbers, emails, or any other data that could be reasonably used to identify an individual for the purposes of creating an autism registry. We talked a lot about this before, how terrified we have parents, people with autism, providers, teachers are about this. And so, members, I offer the A34 to help quell those fears and protect the data of Minnesotans.
Senator Rasmussen to the A34.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could just have a moment here. I haven't gotten the amendment yet.
Then, Senator Rasmussen, I will go to Senator Hoffman to see if he has any reaction to the A34.
Mr. President, Senator McQuay, yield, please.
Senator McQuay, will you yield? She will yield. Senator Hoffman.
So when we had this conversation the other day, good senator from Apple Valley, there was some discussion of you changing, there was some concerned language in changing that. Could you please explain if you made that change, how you made that change, and so on? Thank you.
Senator McQuay.
Thank you, Mr. President. And to Senator Hoffman's question, if folks look at line 1.26 and 1.27, nothing in this section prohibits an individual from transmitting their own identifying information if they so choose. Just wanted to make sure we take in feedback from the floor. Wouldn't want to prevent anybody from voting against the amendment or voting for it, excuse me, because this is very, very important and I know constituents are looking at it.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. If Senator McQuaid will continue to yield. So
She will continue to yield.
Thank
Senator
you,
Hoffman.
Mr. President. Senator McQuaid, one of the other concerns was some of the work that is done at our land grant university. There were some concerns about, well, we wouldn't be able to continue doing this, but your language looks like it should correct that. Is that a correct assumption? Thank you.
Senator McQuaid to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. And to the good Senator from Anoka's question, that was never in peril. The data that is transmitted to our land grant institution for that research is not transferred with identifiable information. So I want folks to be really clear. We are talking about the names, birth dates, addresses, telephone numbers, or electronic mail or email addresses. That is not transmitted at all. It never has been. And so this doesn't imperil that.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Based on that, this is the first time seeing this, other than what we tried the other day, but this makes sense to me. I vote green, please.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to a point of order under Rule 35, germaneness, and I'm prepared to offer advice.
Advice.
Thank you, Mr. President. So Rule 35 says that an amendment has to be germane to the topic before the bill. If you look at the A34 amendment, it's filled with items that are not germane to the bill before the body. First, Mr. President, if you look at page 1, line 5, the chapter that's cited is within consumer protection. It's regarding data practices. This is something that would go to the Senate Commerce Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee because it's related to prohibiting business practices, which is not the primary jurisdiction of the Human Services Committee. And in addition, Mr. President, just to give more evidence, it also requires Attorney General enforcement of this provision as well. And so, Mr. President, I'd ask that you find the point of order well taken. This is dealing with a substantially different subject, which is the barrier for germaneness in Rule 35.
Mr. President.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. President. While Senator Rasmussen is correct that it would have jurisdiction in other places, it also has jurisdiction in Human Services, the primary place we deal with the health care for people with autism in the state of Minnesota. You will see the word autism throughout the bill. We deal with EIDBI centers, and the health care data, particularly that is owned and operated by the state of Minnesota for people with autism, is kept within the jurisdiction of the Human Services Committee. What's more is the type of data that was promised to be collected in order to create that registry is including from the very healthcare we talk about here in the Human Services budget. There are several bills that this amendment can and should go in, Mr. President. Human Services is one of them.
Let's see. Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, I would rise to urge you to find the point of order well taken. The author of the amendment, just previous in our discussions here on the floor, rose to a point of order successfully. Even though 265L was in the bill, she eloquently argued that it was under a different committee's jurisdiction, and therefore you found the point of order well taken and ruled the amendment out of order. You should do the same on this amendment that the author has now proposed.
Senator Rasmussen, you've already spoken, unless there's something different that you're going to say. Senator Westland.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Oh, we're on a point of order. I haven't ruled yet. Senator McQuaid, you've spoken unless there's something you really want to say, because I want to make sure that we can rule on the point of order. The point of order is well taken. Any other amendments? The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
House File Number 2434, a bill for an act relating to human services, modifying provisions relating to aging and older adult services, disability services, substance use disorder treatment, housing supports, etc.
Third reading. Any other discussion on third reading? We'll start with Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I start off my remarks with gratitude to the Senate Human Services Committee, and I really appreciate the leadership of Senator Hoffman, Senator Abler, and all of our committee members for the discussions that we have in committee. And I think, Mr. President, we probably heard every bill that was referred to the committee. So every member's ideas are welcomed, and you can have the opportunity to talk about any topic of human services that you're hearing about from your constituents. And I think the work of the Senate Human Services Committee is very important, Mr. President, because we are dealing with decisions that impact the most vulnerable here in Minnesota. And I'll just give an example. When the governor's budget proposal came out with more than $1 billion in cuts to Minnesota nursing homes and disability services, I had a concerned father from Fergus Falls reach out because his son received those disability services that were going to be cut. And he reached out and he drove 6 hours round trip to come and have 3 minutes in front of our committee to tell us about his son, the precious life he represents, and to bring a picture to show who we're making decisions for in front of this committee. And I know everyone on the committee takes these decisions very seriously. However, Mr. President, I am concerned with the direction that we're seeing in this bill and in other proposals within the human services space. We have seen hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts proposed to nursing homes and disability services. And that's what we see in this bill, Mr. President. Hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts to disability services and to Minnesota nursing homes. So I think it's important that we recognize how we got here. I think Minnesotans are asking how we got here. And back in 2023, when Democrats had control of the Minnesota Senate, the House, and the governor's office, we had an $18 billion surplus. And now we're looking at a $6 billion deficit because in one budget cycle, single-party control increased the state government budget by nearly 40%. And that's why, Mr. President, we're here today facing these really tough decisions within the human services space. And Mr. President, I'm disappointed that we don't get the opportunity to actually vote on budget targets here on the Senate floor, because I think we could have had a really great debate around the priorities that Senate Democrats have set out. We've seen Governor Walz, again, propose $1 billion in cuts to Minnesota nursing homes and to disability services, but he refuses to touch a dime of taxpayer-funded benefits for illegal immigrants, whether that's health care, taxpayer-funded free health care for illegal immigrants, whether it's tax credits or other things that the Democrat trifecta spent money on. They have decided that they would rather cut nursing homes and services for families with disabilities than to look at reprioritizing the dollars that are used to subsidize illegal immigration and incentivize it here to the state. And one of the things that's been talked about, Mr. President, is that that is an especially costly decision for this budget area because taxpayer-funded health care for illegal immigrants is not eligible for a federal match. We are giving up an additional dollar in funding towards nursing homes, towards disability services, towards increasing Medicaid rates for Minnesota's hospitals when we are spending money in that area. And I think the feedback that I've heard from Minnesotans as we're looking to make tough budget decisions in this area is that they're asking for us to put Minnesotans first. And I think that we have missed opportunities in this budget. We have missed opportunities across the budget target to do that. My hope, Mr. President, is that in the coming days, as budget negotiations continue, that we will listen to Minnesotans and their priorities And instead of cutting Minnesota nursing homes and disability services by hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe we'll look to reprioritize some of the spending that was done under single-party control under the Democrats to help solve some of these problems that we see with this bill. So with that, Mr. President, I will be voting against this bill because we can do better for the Minnesotans who are most vulnerable. We can do better for those people that came down in front of our committee, and I think we can.
Senator Grudenhagen, we're on third reading.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, thank you, Senator Rasmussen, for your comments. The members, there's something that's a growing concern in the HHS budget that I think we all need to be aware of. And that means, I believe it's in the next biennium, if I recall. And by the way, first I want to start out and say thank you to Senator Hoffman as chairman of the committee. He ran it in a very bipartisan way, and he was very encouraging of good discussion and questions. I think he only cut me off one time, if I remember right. And he did it gently. Anyway, so I want to thank him for that and the members that were on there, because we had good discussion on this. But one of the things that came out is that the HHS budgets in the next biennium are going to surpass our education budgets, K-12 and higher ed. So members, as a part of the general fund, we are now going to be spending more money in the HHS area than we are on the education of our children, for the first time that I know of in the history of the state of Minnesota. Couple that with what the counties put up with, where the HHS budget is a major driver of property tax increases. And members, we are headed towards a crisis where we're already facing a $6 billion deficit. And there's just a couple areas where members, we pass laws that are very well intended, but we never evaluate them in most cases for cost or effectiveness. And this was brought out before, and I'll just give you two examples. The first one is on autism. Number one, back in 1960, and do your research, about 1 in 10,000 children were identified as autistic. And by the way, members, I have a nephew who's on the spectrum. So I want to do what's best for children in this situation. I've seen some of the consequences in a family with an autistic child and what can be accomplished and the improvement that you can actually see. So, but in 2017, on a per participant, just to finish my previous comment, so in 1960, we're at about 1 in 10,000. Today, if you do your research, we're 1 out of 36 children. Now, again, there's been medical advancements. They can probably identify things better. But members, we've gone from 1 out of 10,000 in 1960 to 1 out of 36. And by the way, it was shared in the committee that in the Somali community, it's 1 out of 16. So back in, there's an exponential growth in terms of autism. Now, at the national level, they're trying to get to the root problem of this. Something's wrong. But in 2017, let's look at the cost. We were spending a little over about $6,500 per participant per year, okay, for autism. 6 years later, in 2023, we're spending $45,000 per participant. Members, $6,500 to $45,000, and we know there's fraud in there also. The point is, I want to treat these children the best that we can and give them the best opportunity. But we need to evaluate. We just can't keep piling on more and more requirements. We need to evaluate these requirements and find out whether they're cost effective and whether they're effective in actually helping the situation. I know people pass these things with good intentions, but around here in government, in so many areas, and this being one of them, we just pile on and pile on. The other thing that should be done, we should have comparative data with other states. What are they spending? What are their results? But we never get that for us to evaluate. So you know, it was stated earlier, it went up 3,000%. At what point do we look at that and do what's best for the child and the family versus just keep piling on more and more regulations? The next area I'll just comment on, and again, this is a concern of the growth of HHS. Here in Minnesota, we spend on, excuse me a minute, Mr. President.
And Senator Gruenhagen, can you make sure that this is around what's in this bill? We are on final passage.
Autism is discussed in this bill. Okay. Okay. I'm trying to get at the exploding cost in the HHS budget. Okay. So the other thing that Minnesota's in 2022 spent $51,215 per participant in medical assistance. That is twice the national average, members. Twice the national average. Now, maybe we need to spend that, but it sure would be nice to look at the laws and regulations that have driven up that cost and whether or not they've been evaluated for cost and effectiveness. Because we cannot keep this growth going. That's the problem. Again, the HHS budget is going to exceed our educational budget. It's driving up our property insurance. And when you look at the bill before us, and it cuts nursing homes, and yet it keeps, we didn't want to end health care for illegal immigrants, which we could get a match from the federal government. I'm sorry, but I'm just not going to be able to support this bill. Hopefully it'll come back in better shape when it comes back. But members, we have to get at the root cause of these increasing and exploding costs. It's going to bankrupt the state. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other discussion before we vote? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is like many bills that we have before us. There are some positive things in this bill. Increasing personal care attendant rates, for example, is just one that I would mention. Critical access nursing facilities, that is essential. I appreciate the small increases in those programs, but there's just something that I cannot get to a yes vote on this bill, and I'm going to tell you why. Specifically, just in Dodge and Olmsted counties, the counties that I am so honored to represent, just in those two counties, are most vulnerable, those who are in our long-term care facilities. And let me tell you, people don't wake up and say, I want to move to a long-term care facility now. No, they do not. They go to a long-term facility care setting because they need the care. These are hard choices. And already care is often more than $8,000 a month, some $10,000. I'm sure there are other costs even higher. But here's what's happening in Dodge and Olmsted County. The nursing homes in Dodge and Olmsted County, under the bill that is before us today, will receive over $8 million, $8.4 million less in funding at a time when their needs are growing. We have more and more Minnesotans who need long-term care. The costs of providing long-term care are going up. The costs of energy, the cost for staff. Some of those we have necessitated right here on this Senate floor by some of the policies that we have passed that have made it even more expensive to care for our loved ones, my constituents, who are in long-term care facilities. And yet the bill before us today is seeking, will cut over $8 million from those who need it most.
members, I cannot support that. And I encourage others to know how this bill will affect their constituents.
Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, members, I urge us to vote no, send this back, and get it better. Members, I hear from constituents. I go to meetings with nursing home directors and staff. I talk to folks that are doing adult family foster care and other disability services, and they are concerned because of the cuts that the governor and the Democrats have put forward. We had an $18 billion surplus 2 years ago. The Democrat trifecta ran through all of that money, plus $10 billion more in tax increases, and now we're facing a $6 billion deficit. And some of that money that they wasted of the surplus was to fund health care for illegal immigrants to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars that the taxpayers here in Minnesota are now paying. And when we face a deficit, when the Republicans bring forth amendments to stop that kind of wasteful spending and prioritize Minnesotans, the Democrats vote it down. The governor doesn't even propose that we cut those funding sources to illegal immigrants for help with their health care. Rather make Minnesotans pay for it. Rather make our seniors in the nursing homes receive less funding so we can continue to fund illegal immigrants' health care and other education costs for illegal immigrants while Minnesotans get the shaft. That's what's going on with the DFL priorities here. We're seeing it through and through with the governor's proposal not touching any wasteful spending. The Democrat leadership won't touch the wasteful spending here either. And so it's time for us to tell Minnesotans what's going on here. Minnesota taxpayers are being abused. And it's time we reprioritize Minnesotans first. The taxpayers of Minnesota ought to be the priority, the elderly and the disabled, and they shouldn't be the ones cut. The governor's proposal, the Democrats' proposal, is to raise property taxes but keep funding illegal immigrants' health care. That is wrong. It's time to make Minnesotans first. Vote no, let's get this bill sent back and do better.
Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to thank Senator Hoffman for having a diligent and serious conversation on this topic. This past weekend on Sunday after church, after meeting with Senator Pah for a couple hours, I then met with Senator Hoffman. And we had a conversation on this bill as it was coming up on the floor this week. And I appreciate the conversation, and we share the passion of the responsibility for seniors, for the disabled, and others who absolutely need help. And that conversation with Senator Hoffman, again, was in good faith, and I sincerely appreciate that. And I appreciate the work. It's my understanding is there is at least bits and pieces of the waiver reimagine in here. It's spread across several different provisions, is my understanding. And that's good work. It's something we need to do. But Mr. President, Senator Hoffman, unfortunately, I will have to be no on this. One of the things that's making this a challenge and unable to support the bill before us is the cuts that are going to be made to one of the senior living facilities in my area, Guardian Angels. They are a phenomenal organization that is doing great work for the seniors in our area. And according to this, they're going to be losing approximately $1 million. One organization, $1 million over the next 4 years. And that makes it a real challenge. And it comes down to priorities, Mr. President. On the one hand, we can continue, as the Democrats have done, to fund illegal foreign nationals, people that do not belong here legally. We can use taxpayer dollars to fund the health care of illegal foreign nationals, or we can prioritize, and Minnesota tax dollars can go to help Minnesotans who are seniors and Minnesotans who are disabled. Unfortunately, that is not happening. Democrats are choosing illegals over seniors and the disabled, and that's wrong. We have to vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. And I just wanted to address a few issues in this bill that I see, and I talked about them last year and probably the year before. And that's the reduced funding for our local nursing homes. I do find it quite interesting that when we look at some of the bills that have been passed over the years, starting in 2023, and all the money was spent in that biennium. Yet in that biennium, we did very little to help our elderly and help our nursing homes. 2024 wasn't much better. Now in 2025, we're taking some pretty massive cuts in our nursing homes, in our homes for the disabled, and also in the assisted living arena. And I cannot blame Senator Abler or Senator Hoffman for this, because the numbers Senator Hoffman got were numbers he were given and that he had to work within, and I understand that. The problem is that this started 3 years ago. And the governor kind of set the stage for what's happening this year. With his budget that he first came out with cutting a lot of money from the nursing homes and things like that, turning around then and sending down the amount that was left in, sending that down to the county so they would be forced to raise property taxes. I think it's really unfortunate when we take a look at what's going on, and we have a lot of senior citizens, by no choice of their own, outlive their money. And I think that's unfortunate that we're treating the way we're treating them. We're willing to spend money to take care of illegal aliens with their health insurance. But if we take a look at Minnesota, and how did we become a strong state like we are in Minnesota? It's by work that a lot of the people done that are now in our nursing homes. They made a lot of sacrifices. They did without a lot of things to make the state of Minnesota great and make the country great. And so today we're looking at them and saying, sorry, you're past your time, you ran out of money, fend for yourself. And I think that's really unfortunate. I think we really need to take a look at how we're doing these things. We certainly, after the spending spree that we had in 2023, we knew this was coming, and you'd almost have to be blind if you didn't think it was coming. Excuse me, Tori, I don't want you to take that personal. But I think that we would have to really be mislooking at what's going on to not know that this was going to happen. There were several warning notices. We ignored them. We've done nothing about it. And here we are again today with our people in our nursing homes wondering how they're going to survive. Last year I talked about this, and I talked about maybe some of these people be put in wheelchairs and set under somebody's apple tree to be taken care of. You know, it's really unfortunate when you can speak like that, and we've got people sitting in nursing homes that really do wonder what's going to happen. They have no relatives that are immediately in their area. They don't know where they're going to go for shelter. They don't know where they're going to go to be taken care of. Yet we can't find any money to take care of them. I think that that's unfortunate. I think we can do better than that, and I think that before we get done with these bills in the next couple of weeks, we need to make sure we do take care of those folks, and we do better than what we're doing. And there's ways that we can do that. We just have to prioritize where we're going to spend our money a little bit better. And I don't want to say I told you so, but folks, we knew this was coming at the end of 2023 when we saw the budget and saw the 40% increase in the previous budget, and also saw the billions of dollars of money that was spent, the $18 billion in surplus, the $10 billion in taxes, and a lot of the one-time spending that was done with money left over from COVID, and all the other little places there was money that was scraped out and spent for things that today now have put us in the position we are at. So I think we have to do a little better than that and make sure we take care of our nursing homes, our disabled, and also take care of the people in assisted living. Thank you, members.
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it, and I agree with much of what's been shared from several of my colleagues, so I promise I won't reiterate what they've had to say. I'd like to come at this from a little bit of a different perspective, and that's the perspective of my counties and cities that I represent, in addition to my constituents. You know, when the governor came out with his proposal, as the state of Minnesota learned it was staring at a $6 billion deficit, he said he was going to go ahead and offer a lot of cuts. What I don't think he fully explained to people was he really wasn't offering or proposing cuts. What he was proposing were shifts. He was simply saying, well, I'm going to make sure that maybe the state government's not going to be paying for some of these services. But what wasn't said out loud is that the expectation was, or the reality of the situation was, that all of that funding and the commitments to spend those dollars were simply going to be shifted to counties and to cities. All they did was shift the blame, Mr. President. And now we've got officials at the county and city level that have nothing to do with the situation they've been put in, trying to figure out how they're going to budget for the future and explain to their residents and their constituents why we are in the position that we're in. In my district, I represent a lot of young families, a lot of seniors on fixed incomes, a lot of middle-class, hardworking folks. Every dollar matters to them and to their families as they look to provide for their loved ones and plan for their futures. And Minnesotans need to know and understand what's really happening right now. They need to understand the bait and switch that's taking place. When their state government takes billions of dollars, uses it to increase spending, to increase taxes, and create a $6 billion deficit, and then come back to those same folks and say, now we're going to do the responsible thing and cut spending. When in reality, what they're doing, but not saying out loud, is really we're passing the buck to your local units of government. And ultimately, Mr. President, what we're doing is we're passing the buck to you because you're the ones who are going to see your property taxes continue to skyrocket. So when the people of Minnesota are looking around and talking to their neighbors when they get their tax statements in the mail, asking, hey, how much did your property taxes go up? Why are they skyrocketing? Why are they continuing to increase? The answer is plain and simple. It's because they have a state government that's got a spending problem, and rather than tighten its belt, it's simply passing the buck to the people of Minnesota in the form of property taxes and other taxes and fees. So if we're going to fix this problem long term, it certainly shouldn't be on the backs of the people of Minnesota and their pocketbooks. The government needs to get real, look in the mirror, reduce its spending if we're ever going to have a chance at fixing this long-term issue, Mr. President. Thank you.
The last two speakers, if they want to say anything, will be that of Senator Hoffman and Senator Abler. Senator Mann.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Senator Hoffman for this bill because we are prioritizing Minnesotans. We are prioritizing Minnesota residents. And I want to briefly just mention some of the fallacies that were said on the floor today. We heard that because we are giving access to health care to Minnesota residents, that means that we are cutting funding to our nursing homes and our assisted living facilities. So, first of all, Minnesota Care is not an MCO capitated program. It is a fee-for-service program. So established benefit per person comment is false. The $7,000 per person comment is false. That's not how fee-for-service works. Minnesota Care is not free health care. It has premiums and copays just like any other program. So the idea that we are handing out free health care is false. The made-up number of $600 million for this program is false. That is a demonstrably false number. Minnesota Care expansion so far has cost $3 million, $3.4 million. So I don't know what nursing homes and waiver services and everything else we are magically going to fund with that money if we take away health care from Minnesota residents. No matter what happens, all Minnesota residents will get care in the emergency room. And this is significantly more expensive to taxpayers than when people get care in a clinic. And on top of that, hospitals are paying $460 million per year on charity care for people who don't have insurance or people who have insurance, but they don't cover their services that they need. So when people have access to health care, it saves taxpayers money. The root cause of the increasing cost of MA and the human services budget is the privatization of health care. It is not because of the people who need health care. And it's also because we have a federal government that has cut $226 million from MDH, $27 million from DHS, $18 million from our food banks and our food shelves. It is not because people need health care. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Abler, your comments before we go to Senator Hoffman so we can vote on final passage of House File 2434.
Thank you, Mr. President. And a lot of things have been said. This is an extremely complicated area, an extremely sensitive area. And I appreciate Senator Hoffman for his decades of concern about people with disabilities and the thoughtfulness in this bill that, frankly, is an agonizing process, having sat through this in 2011 and in even more severe times. I respect the effort. And I want to thank him for letting me work on the A19 amendment and finding ways to buy back some of the things. There's one thing I neglected to mention. The day services, we bought that back as well. Some of that was off my list. And that would actually have been a true cut to day services, and that would have been catastrophic. Mr. President, my concern going forward with this actually pretty decent thing, the nursing home parts, I'm not happy with that part. But going forward into a conference time when the governor, with all respect to their process, came up with a proposal that I find almost wholly unacceptable, and in the other body with their process with the deep county shifts, I find to be entirely, that component to be unacceptable. I do want to just take a second before I finish to thank the departmental staff that's worked with us. They are phenomenal. They do not sleep, literally. I won't list all the names, but there's some people that are pretty phenomenal, along with our own staff, the council and finance staff. But going forward, Mr. President, I hope that the people pay attention, both as legislators and as members of the public, to remind all the conferees on this that a property tax, that a county shift is a property tax increase, and it's not a real solution. The real solutions come in finding new and better ways to do business, finding better ways to discover savings, finding better ways to serve individuals, to keep them both independent and maybe even move through the process and not require these services. So we have our hands full, Mr. President, and I want to thank the body for its good attention and even our divergent opinions. But at the end, the point here is to serve all the Minnesotans, particularly those who have the challenges that we so are concerned about. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hoffman, for your final comments before we vote for final passage as amended of House File 2434.
Mr. President, today we close one of the most challenging chapters in recent memory. The passage of this human services budget marks not just the end of a legislative process, but, Mr. President, a reaffirmation of who we are and what we value as a state. When the deficit became clear, we were at a crossroads, as I said in my opening comments. Some might have chosen the easier route by shifting costs. Thank you, Senator Duckworth, for reminding us about that. Shifting costs to counties, carving deeply into disability services, or using those cuts to fund the unrelated priorities. But we did choose a different path, Mr. President. We made a conscious decision to respond with the collective responsibility, not division. We agreed and disagreed across parties, across chambers, that everyone associated with services would need to tighten their belts. Everyone, equally. This wasn't about balancing numbers on the backs of the most vulnerable. It was about protecting the integrity of the whole system. That's a different conversation. We did not pit a group against a group. We didn't take from one to give to another. Instead, we approached this crisis with the understanding that our strength lies in our unity, and that the people who rely on these services, Mr. President, deserve thoughtful, courageous governance, even in terrible times. Yes, these are hard times. And yes, the future of human services financing remains uncertain. But today, we did something remarkable. We worked together. We honored our shared obligation to Minnesotans, especially those whose voices are too often overlooked. And in that spirit, Mr. President, I want to extend deep gratitude to everyone who helped shape this budget. Everyone, Mr. President. Myself, Senator Omar Fateh, Senator Jordan Rasmussen, Senator Glenn Gruenhagen, Senator Aaron May Quaid, Senator Zainab Mohammed, Senator Paul Utke, Senator Melissa Whitgland, David Zack, our committee administrator, Cassie Soar, our community legislative assistant, Chris Meyer, the legislative assistant vice chair, Leah Monahan, analyst, and Kyle Raymond, fiscal analyst. Those two state employees, unbelievable work. We should be grateful as a state to have two nonpartisan folks like that working for us. Emily Spatira, our DFL research person, Bryce Hinkst, our GOP research person, Chloe Aday, community page, Olivia Anderson, Rowan Chafee, community pages that actually worked when our committee was working. I also want to put a shout out, Mr. President, Elise Bailey, Christy Grom, and Carrie Briones, 3 state employees at the Department of Human Services and Direct Care and Treatment that give their heart and soul to the work that we do, because you know what? They care. They care what matters. And so thank you, Elise, Christy, and Carrie, for that work. Our interns, Amanda Rivera, Torres, Amber Dunham, and Cal Latteral. But here's the thing I really want to do is a heartfelt thank you to Senator Jim Abler. Senator Abler is the only member in this chamber who has lived through both the good times and the tough ones, the very tough ones in human services funding in both chambers. He was here in 2011 when we had to cut almost $2 billion from essential programs, and he's here now. And he offered the steady hand, institutional knowledge, and deep care for people. Senator Abler, your wisdom and commitment that you have made an indelible impact on this process. We could not have done this today without your service. You need to know that. So as we move forward, let's hold on to what we've learned, that our greatest strength is our ability to come together, especially when the stakes are high. Mr. President, let's continue to build a future where Minnesota's most vulnerable are seen, heard, and supported. And with that, Mr. President, please vote green.
The Secretary would take the roll on House File 2434 as amended. Senator Westland, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
Senator Klein votes aye.
Senator Klein votes aye.
Senator Zhang votes aye.
Senator Zhang votes aye.
Senator Wickland votes aye.
Senator Wickland votes aye.
And Senator Housechild votes aye.
And Senator Housechild votes aye. Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Coleman votes no.
Senator Coleman votes no.
Senator Weber votes no.
Senator Weber votes no.
Senator Liskey votes no.
Senator Liskey votes no.
Senator Anderson votes no.
Senator Anderson votes no.
Mr. President.
Senator Jasinski.
Senator Rarick votes no.
Senator Rarick votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Mr. President,
Senator Jasinski.
Senator Johnson votes no.
Senator Johnson votes no. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There being 35 ayes and 32 noes, House File 2434 as amended has passed and is title agreed to. Members, we'll go to the next bill, which is House File 2115. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we open up this session again in the Minnesota Senate, I want to begin by recognizing what a difficult and demanding year this has been, not only for this legislative body, but more important, the people that we serve. And in our Human Services Committee work, we are confronted with some difficult truths. We've heard stories of people caught in red tape while trying to access essential care. We've seen providers and families struggling to hold up to a system stretched to its limits, but even in these faces of these challenging, there has been something extraordinary in collaboration. So this year's Human Services Policy Omnibus Bill, Senate File 2443, which of course is sitting on the board, it's not just a product of the legislative compromise, it's a testament to the power of partnership. We've included some thoughtful provisions to protect long-term care residents from retaliation and exploitation. We've updated standards in direct care and treatment to better reflect the realities of our workforce. And we've worked with advocates, providers, and bipartisan partners to make changes that matter in people's lives. We recognize, Mr. President, that protecting someone's dignity doesn't start with a budget line. It starts with policy. It starts with values, with a commitment to equity, safety, and humanity. To every advocate, every caregiver, and every community member who came forward, your voice helped shape this bill. Thank you. And to my colleagues, I look forward to continuing our work together. Let's lead with purpose. Let's push for policies that reflect the compassion Minnesota deserves. Let's stay focused on solutions. Because this work, Mr. President, this responsibility is not just about systems and statutes. It's about people, and they're counting on us. Please accept the A1 amendment.
Senator Hoffman offers the A1 amendment. The secretary will report the A1 amendment.
Senator Hoffman moves to amend House File number 2115 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 6 to 7, delete sections 9 to 11. This is the A1 amendment.
Senator Hoffman to your A1 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this is actually our technical assistance, because it's policy. Technical assistance we needed from the Department of Human Services. We absolutely also had to remove language that is traveling in the budget bill, which y'all just passed. So that language gets removed. We also removed the language related to the waiver reimagine that was deemed unnecessary given changes that were being made to the waiver reimagine in the budget bill. So that was the fix in there. We removed that language. And we did portions of the waiver reimagine language that was retained is still in there. So they traveled in both places, Mr. President. And it also contains the compromise language that in Senator Dibble's Senate File 1918, remember we got ruled, whatever it is, I'm not going to say the word because if I say the number 2 and the 1, somebody will say you said Rule 21, and I didn't say Rule 21, but I just said it, so don't Rule 21 me, Mr. President. We did that. It went back, made the changes in Rules Committee. That is the compromise language that's in there, and also there's compromise language related to the substance use treatment coordination provider qualifications. So that was all cleaned up. So with that is the A1. Please vote green.
Any other discussion on the A1 amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the A1 say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the A1 Hoffman amendment is adopted. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to offer the A6 amendment.
Senator Rasmussen offers the A6 amendment. The secretary will report the A6 amendment.
Senator Rasmussen moves to amend House File number 2115 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 36, delete section 12 and insert. This is the A6 amendment.
Senator Rasmussen to the A6 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The A6 amendment is building on a provision that is in the policy bill currently that deals with a facility on the National Register of Historic Places and some of the challenges that they face around meeting the physical plant requirements that are in our assisted living licensure. After further technical assistance from the Minnesota Department of Health, I have formulated this to have it be targeted towards a specific facility that is on the National Register of Historic Places. What happened, Mr. President, is that this facility was licensed as an assisted living facility and then no longer was. And because of new requirements on the physical plant, they are unable to operate given the historic nature of the building. And so this would address this concern, would ask for member support.
Senator Hoffman to the A6 amendment.
A6 amendment, Green. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the A6 amendment say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the A6 Rasmussen amendment is adopted. Senator Grudenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President, members. I would like to offer the A4 amendment.
Senator Grudenhagen offers the A4 amendment. The secretary will report the A4 amendment.
Senator Grudenhagen moves to amend House File Number 2115 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 53 after line 2, insert. This is the A4 amendment.
Senator Grudenhagen to your A4 amendment, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President, members. What this amendment does, you know, every year we pass additional mandates and regulations onto our nursing home and providers. And basically, they're well-intended, I know that. But the point is, we don't generally evaluate them for cost or effectiveness. So all this amendment does, especially we are at a time where nursing homes are being reduced and cut, and there are already many of them are just barely holding on. In fact, I've lost 2 nursing homes in the last several years in one of my counties, and talking to other nursing homes, they're just barely holding on, and now they're going to get some additional cuts. So these new mandates and regulations that are passed, they would have to be evaluated. Wait, just a minute once. But we can't come each year to continue with more rules on our nursing homes. Therefore, they have to be evaluated by the Department of Health for cost and effectiveness before they would be implemented onto the nursing homes. And I've talked about this before, where we just pile on and pile on and pile on, well-meaning, drives up the cost, and actually hurts the care. We want to make sure that when we do, and we do need some regulations and mandates, but the thing is we want to make sure they're effective, that they help the residents, and that they don't drive up the cost at a time where our nursing homes are at a critical stage in many cases. So I hope Senator Hoffman will see this as a friendly amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hoffman to the A4 Grudenhagen amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I don't see it as a friendly amendment because I'm having a hard time. I'm having a hard time with the conflicting piece of the prior, the commissioner approving additional training. Did Senator, will you yield there, Senator Grudenhagen?
Senator Grudenhagen, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Hoffman.
Mr. Senator from Glencoe, Arlington, there's a question. Looking at your language in here, it almost believes this is a Minnesota Department of Health, but it almost looks like there's a cost factor to that. The question is, did you put into consideration of the cost factor in this? A, B, is this something that we had put, because I'm not, this is the first time I'm seeing this language, so help me understand, Glenn.
Senator Grudenhagen, specifically to the question.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the question, Senator Hoffman. Yeah, and all this is doing is that the Department of Health, before implementing and mandating this onto our nursing homes, would have to consider the cost and the effectiveness. Basically, the cost should be neutral, and it should help the patients and the staff to be able to carry out their necessary job requirements.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. That answers my question. There is going to be a cost to this. So, Mr. President and members, I would ask that you vote no on this amendment.
Senator Hoffman, did you ask for a roll call vote?
Thank you, Mr. President. I thought there was a rebuttal on that. No, I would ask for a roll call vote on this, Mr. President. Thank you.
Roll call
Yes.
requested, roll call granted. Any other discussion before we go to the author of the amendment? Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. And on your desk, you'll find a letter from the long-term care imperative that outlines their concerns with this policy bill. And Mr. President, we just had a majority of members in this body vote to cut nursing homes by hundreds of millions of dollars in the previous bill. And now with this bill, we have long-term care providers telling us that they have concerns around the implementation of additional regulations and training requirements that are in this policy bill. And that's why I am in support of Senator Gruenhagen's A4 amendment. And it's very simple, Mr. President, because many of these additional regulations in the policy bill did not come from the Minnesota Department of Health, the regulator for nursing homes and assisted living facilities. They were brought by outside groups. They are opposed by providers. And what this amendment would do is it would simply require the Minnesota Department of Health to ensure that these new regulations have a direct positive impact on patient or resident safety while not imposing a financial hardship on the provider. And Mr. President, I think after cutting nursing homes by hundreds of millions of dollars, by putting additional regulations on them in this bill, I think the least we can do is to show that the commissioner has to determine that these new regulations will actually have a positive impact. I think that's a very easy thing to say yes to, and I would encourage members' support.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I'm going to urge a no vote, in part because what we have before us here is that the Commissioner of Health has to prove that additional training or regulation will have a direct positive impact on patient or resident safety while not imposing a financial hardship on the provider. So we have not talked about health. What if a regulation improves health of residents or patients, but it doesn't improve their safety, it's just about their health? What if it improves the health and safety of the nurses or the staff at the facility? This is an amendment that's not going to do what I think folks want it to do, and it costs money. And so this would put our bill out of balance, and it would go against our rules. I would suggest we vote this down and try again a different way.
Any other discussion? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, you know, I served on the board of a nursing home for 9 years. I recently left that role. It was a volunteer position. Here's what I think I understand in this. There should be no additional cost. All we're asking is the commissioner to review it and make sure that there's a cost-benefit analysis done and that it has value to our nursing homes. And Mr. President, just saying that it's going to have a cost does not mean that it actually is going to pull one in. I also am sympathetic to the very fact that we are imposing a lot of additional regulation on our nursing homes, and we're already having a hard time attracting staff and talent, especially with all the regulations that have been piled on to all employers. Nursing homes and assisted living facilities are struggling to even more to find those workers. So, Mr. President, I think this is a good amendment. We should expect a commissioner to do a cost-benefit analysis, and I urge a green vote.
Last voice we'll hear before we vote will be that of the author of the A4 amendment, Senator Gruenhagen.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I would have a question for Senator Hoffman if he'd yield.
Senator Hoffman, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Gruenhagen.
Well, thank you, Senator Hoffman. Say, I forget the number, but I know it's in the thousands how short we are in the area of nursing home staff. Do you remember right offhand what
Senator
the shortage is?
Senator Hoffman, to a specific question.
Mr. President, I can tell you, in the caregiver bucket, remember, Mr. President, what we did is we put everybody into this caregiver bucket. There's 53,000 job openings. So I don't have the breakout on the nursing home side, whether it be licensed or unlicensed. So, but I can tell you it's 53,000 job openings in the caregiver bucket.
Senator Grutenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Senator Hoffman, for that response. Members, 53,000 shortage of workers in our caregiver. A big part of that is nursing homes, which we know they need 24/7 care. These are some of the most critically ill people that have a lot of health problems and need 24/7 care in most cases. And we're 53,000 short, not only in nursing homes, but across the spectrum. And then, members, we pile more and more requirements and mandates onto these facilities. At a time where they're receiving cuts, they're short workers, and then there's even more requirements. Any commissioner worth his salt should at least evaluate the cost and effectiveness before passing these mandates onto these caregiver facilities for the sake of our residents, to make sure that they help the patient and that they're cost neutral. If you have to pay extra money for a commissioner in charge of an agency to do that, I think you need a different commissioner. That should be part of his responsibility, his scope of practice, to look at these and say, is this really helping, hurting, or artificially inflating the cost? You know, on the last bill I brought up, we're just piling on and on and on and on, and we're headed towards a fiscal crisis. And this is just a small step to evaluate that, especially in the area of our caregivers. Members, please vote green, and I hope that Senator Hoffman has a change of heart. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Secretary would take the roll on the A4 amendment. Senator Westland, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Port votes no.
Senator Port votes no.
Senator Marty votes no.
Senator Marty votes no.
Senator Murphy votes no.
Senator Murphy votes no.
Senator Klein votes no.
Senator Klein votes no.
Senator Zhang votes no.
Senator Zhang votes no.
Senator Housechild votes no.
And Senator Housechild votes no. Senator Westland?
My apologies. I thought I said Senator McEwen, Mr. President. Senator McEwen votes no.
Senator McEwen votes no. Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Liskey votes aye.
Senator Liskey votes aye.
Senator Weber votes aye.
Senator Weber votes aye.
Senator Johnson votes aye.
Senator Johnson votes aye. All senators having voted who desires to vote. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 32 ayes and 34 noes, the A4 Grutenhagen Amendment is not adopted. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would offer the A2 amendment.
Senator Rasmussen offers the A2 amendment. The Secretary will report the A2 amendment.
Senator Rasmussen moves to amend House File Number 2115 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Pages 93 to 95, delete sections 40 to 41. This is the A2 amendment.
Senator Rasmussen to your A2 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The A2 amendment would delete the pause on the 48-hour rule from this bill. And I want to direct members' attention to a letter that is on their desk from the Minnesota County Attorneys Association and the Minnesota Sheriff's Association. And I'll just read two sentences from that. They say, we oppose any bill that continues the pause of the 48-hour rule without making investments in expanding capacity. We ask that you remove this provision from your policy bill. And Mr. President and members, I am glad that with Senator Abler's amendment in the finance bill that we did put $75 million towards increasing capacity at direct care and treatment. I think that's a positive next step. But I'm concerned, Mr. President, with what that might mean in a final conference committee report. And so I wanted to offer this amendment, and Mr. President was wondering if Senator Hoffman would yield for a question.
Senator Hoffman, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Hoffman. Senator Hoffman, I just wanted to get your thoughts on some of the concerns that the sheriffs and the county attorneys have when it comes to basically ignoring the 48-hour rule and not addressing capacity, and how you're thinking about this as you continue the conversations on human services bills.
Senator Hoffman to the question.
Mr. President, there's actually was like 3 questions in the one question, but let's go back, if I could be so kind to remind Senator Rasmussen, this started actually in 2013, 2014, and we 2 years ago put some things in place that were then created that task force, which the county attorneys and the counties were all involved in. Then this last year, we had some folks come forward, both from the county commissioner's side and as well as the county sheriff. So I'm seeing the county sheriff's letter for the first time, and I'm also resolving to say, but we just put in Senator Abler's amendment, the Miller building, which is an important piece. Matter of fact, Mr. President, Senator Barr and I were just on a Zoom. Can you believe that? I'm 60 years old and I'm talking about Zoom, Mr. President. So we Zoomed it. We Zoomeranged a meeting with DCT, Direct Care and Treatment, and in Anoka County, talking about the Miller building and the possible expansion of the Anoka County Jail from downtown Anoka out to the river. So, yeah, I think this $75 million that we're putting into Miller gets to the point that the sheriffs are doing. The system actually, and you know this, Senator Rasmussen, there's a 351-bed capacity issue dealing with that. And what we've done is we've now criminalized mental health. There are youth that are still in locked detention facilities in Hennepin County. There are adults that are in locked 23-hour-a-day locked facility. What's the worst thing you can do for somebody with mental health? Isolate them. Not getting the proper care that they need. I think investing in the Miller building is a great step, and it addresses what the sheriffs do. So I don't like this language that you have, Senator Rasmussen. I think it needs some more work on it. Thank you.
Senator Rasmussen to your A2.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Hoffman. I agree that the investment in the Miller building and an increasing capacity of direct care and treatment is very important. And I believe it would help address the concerns that Minnesota's sheriffs and county attorneys have flagged in their letter. My request, Mr. President, to this body is that we continue to closely watch this issue, because a fear that I have is that we could have a final conference committee report come back with no additional capacity increases at direct care and treatment while continuing to pause the 48-hour rule, which deviates from the task force recommendations on priority admissions and their recommendations that were agreed to. So, Mr. President, I will withdraw the A2 amendment, and I'm grateful that we have an investment in the Miller building, but we'll continue to watch this as the process unfolds.
The A2 has been withdrawn. Any other discussion before we go to third reading? Seeing none, I'm sorry. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would offer the A50 amendment.
Senator McQuaid offers the A50 amendment. The Secretary will report the A50 amendment.
Senator Mayquade moves to amend House File Number 2115 as amended pursuant to Rule 45 as follows. Page 2, line 9, before A, insert lowercase a. This is the A50 amendment.
Senator Mayquade to your A50 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I have to, I will go through each section of each part of a bill and say that specific business, that specific healthcare provider, that specific license holder cannot share the identifiable information of people with autism for the purposes of creating a registry. So here we are. We have the A50 amendment, which is specific to 245D license holders, prohibiting them from sharing identifiable data for the purposes of creating an autism registry. I do not know how to express how terrified people with autism, the people who love them, the people who serve and care for them are about this prospect. And it should be every single place in statute that it could possibly be that the state of Minnesota, government entities, corporations, businesses, license holders who are here in the state are not going to be part of that. So if we don't want to accept it in a bill that deals with people with autism and the healthcare and the services they provide, then I'll go through and just do it for specific license holders and specific businesses and specific agencies. So here you have one example. This is for 245D holders. It is a subparagraph of prohibitions on conditions of services. So that is the A50. I urge members to vote green.
And if you stand vote green, are you asking for a roll call?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would request a roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Any other discussion? Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Mayquade yield for a question?
Senator Mayquade will yield, she will yield. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Mayquade. Senator Mayquade, when we talk about license holders, could you explain again what this language, or who this language would apply to, who would be prohibited from sharing this data?
Senator Mayquade, directly to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. The answer to the question is 245D license holders.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Mayquade continue to yield?
Senator Mayquade, will you continue to yield? She will. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Mayquade. And I know when you had an earlier version of this amendment, we had heard from the University of Minnesota that they had concerns around what that original language could mean for their research on autism and the work that they do. And Mr. President, just wanted to ask Senator Mayquade if this addresses the concerns that the University of Minnesota raised.
Senator Mayquade, specifically to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. The University of Minnesota did not raise questions to that. Others raised questions to that. There are data pieces that lots of different entities provide for the purposes of researching trends in autism, rates in autism, locations, ages. What data is not transmitted is the identifiable data of those individuals, their names, their addresses, their birth dates, their email addresses, their phone numbers. That is never transmitted. And so at no point in any of these amendments has any of that research into trends in autism, into rates of autism, been imperiled. What I would like to imperil is the creation of a registry of people with autism, which is what my amendment does.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just reviewing the amendment here because I'm also seeing it for the first time.
If you need more time, Senator Rasmussen, we don't want to hold the mic. We have another person who wants to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, you can go to the other members.
Senator Grudenhagen, specifically to the A50 amendment.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. If Senator Mayquade would yield for a question.
Senator Mayquade will yield for a question. Senator Grudenhagen.
Oh, thanks, Senator Mayquade. This is the first time I've seen this, too. We wouldn't want to just issue... First question is, was this amendment seen in a committee as far as a bill is concerned?
Senator Mayquade, specifically to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, the prospect of a registry of people with autism was actually not put forth until very recently, and this amendment responds to that recentness.
Senator Grudenhagen.
Well, thank you for that response, Senator Mayquade. If she continue to yield?
Will you continue to yield? She will continue to yield.
I'm pretty familiar with HIPAA laws that we have here in the state, and to my understanding, it covers most, if not all of this, in our current HIPAA laws. Or can you clarify that?
Senator McQuaid to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll describe how the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the not a medical doctor person who was going to be put in charge of the registry described it. It was going to take identifiable information of people from their healthcare providers, but also from their Fitbit and their Apple Watches, from their pharmacies, from the businesses, from the services that they receive. So HIPAA applies to healthcare providers about health data. HIPAA does not apply to BetterHelp. HIPAA does not apply to Apple or Google. HIPAA does not apply to people who don't provide you healthcare services. So this is making sure that the identifiable data of people with autism is not shared for the purposes of creating a registry of people, their names, their addresses, their birth dates, so that the registry does not target individual people. That is what this amendment does.
Mr. President?
Senator Grudenhagen.
Yeah, if Senator McQuaid would continue to yield.
Senator, and members, I just want to remind you that what is before us is the A50, and our rules say the member must speak only to the question under debate only. Yep. Senator Grudenhagen.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And would Senator McQuaid continue to yield?
She will yield.
Okay. Does this in any way inhibit Minnesota researchers trying to find some of the causes of autism, in any way inhibit their research?
Senator McQuaid, specifically to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. No.
Senator Grudenhagen.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for that response. The other thing, members, my understanding of the HIPAA thing, you have to initial when you for your healthcare release a form when you go to the medical doctor. And it includes data, medical background, and other information if they want to share that. So, members, having seen this the first time, I think this should have gone to a committee so we could hear stakeholders, pro and con. Nobody wants a registry. And the thing is that I'm not sure that this is going to help or hurt Minnesota research as far as autism and its causes. So I guess members vote your conscience.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the time to get to review this amendment. I'll be voting yes on it. I think we should be careful with individuals' data and making sure that it's going to only places that they consent to. Mr. President, just to make sure that this is, I think, applicable to everything, I wanted to offer the A51 as an amendment to the amendment.
Senator Rasmussen offers as an amendment to the amendment the A51. The Secretary will report the amendment to the amendment, A51.
Senator Rasmussen moves to amend the McQuaid A50 amendment to House File Number 2115 as follows. Page 1, line 7, delete everything after data. This is the A51 amendment to the amendment.
Senator Rasmussen, to your A51 amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I hope that Senator McQuaid will consider this a friendly amendment. What we're doing here is just making sure that it's applicable for any purpose. It's not just for a specific purpose, but that a license holder would be prohibited from disseminating the following data without the consent of the individual who's the subject. I think that should be true in all cases, not just for a narrow, specific part of research. And so I think this makes sure that we're protecting the data of Minnesotans who are under the care of these providers.
Senator McQuaid to the A51 as amended. Excuse me, the A51 amendment to the amendment.
Mr. President, give me just 1 second to look at it.
And while you're looking, I'm going to Senator Lucero. We are on Senator Lucero only on the A51 amendment to the amendment.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. President. Has a roll call been requested on the amendment to the amendment?
No. Would you like to make one?
Yes.
Roll call requested, roll call granted on the amendment to the amendment. Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Senator Rasmussen. This is, if you hadn't done this, Mr. President and Senator Rasmussen, I would have. So I appreciate that he did this. This is the reason, and to Senator McQuaid's amendment, underlined amendment, I am very much in favor of protecting data. But we don't need to be specific. And that's why the Rasmussen amendment to the amendment is important, is because if the amendment to the amendment is adopted, it'll simply read that the license holder is prohibited from disseminating the data. And that's what we want. We want to protect PII, PHI, any sensitive data. It doesn't matter how it's going to be used. It doesn't matter how the recipient may share it, data mine it, what purpose they have. It's we want to protect the data independent of how it would be used because it is the individual who owns the data. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator McQuaid, now to the A51 amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I'm going to urge members to vote no for two reasons. One, this expands the scope far beyond human services. And two, I really get the sense that we're dancing around the only thing that has been proposed to do with the identifiable data of people with autism, which is to research autism as a preventable disease, which it is not. And that is what this amendment is meant to do. Anything beyond that, we are dabbling far outside the scope. There has been no other type of registry with identifiable information that has ever been proposed for people with autism. This needs to be exactly as it is. So I urge members to vote no on the A51, and then we'll go to the underlying amendment.
Members, before we go to the author, I want to make sure there's no one else before we go to the author of the A51 amendment to the amendment. Seeing none, Senator Rasmussen, and then we're going to vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I just want to be clear that the A51 still just applies to the license holders that Senator McQuaid's underlying amendment addresses. And Mr. President, I want to also clarify that the A51, if adopted, will still apply to purposes of researching autism. And so it covers the stated purpose that Senator McQuaid has brought with her amendment, and it actually makes it so that we're protecting data that could be used for other purposes. I think this is a common sense way to protect individuals who are in our disability services system and keep their data private unless they make their own decisions about sharing that data. I'd ask for members' support.
The Secretary will take the roll on the amendment to the amendment, which is the A51. Senator Westland or Senator Bowden, for those who are voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Port votes no.
Senator Port votes no.
Senator McEwen votes no.
Senator McEwen votes no.
Senator Marty votes no.
Senator Marty votes no.
Senator Klein votes no.
Senator Klein votes no.
Senator Zhang votes no.
Senator Zhang votes no.
Senator Rest votes no. Oh, I'm sorry. She voted before she left. I apologize.
Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Johnson votes aye.
Senator Johnson votes aye.
Senator Liskey votes aye.
Senator Liskey votes aye.
And thank you, Mr. President. Senator Weber votes aye.
And Senator Weber votes aye. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There have been 33 ayes and 34 nays. The amendment to the amendment is not adopted. Members will on the underlying amendment. That is the A50. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I'm disappointed that the amendment to the amendment failed, which would have provided greater protections for individuals' data who are part of our state's disability services. I will be supporting the A50. I recommend that members support. I think it's, we want to make sure that we're protecting individuals' data, and this amendment will do that.
Senator Farnsworth, you were on my list. Did you still want to speak? Senator Farnsworth.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator May Quaid yield for a question?
She will yield for a question. Senator Farnsworth.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I'm looking at this amendment, and I keep hearing, in fact, I believe Senator May Quaid has said 3 times that the purpose of this amendment is to prevent the creation of a registry, but I don't see the word registry anywhere in this amendment. I wonder if Senator May Quaid can tell me which line the word registry is found on this amendment.
Senator May Quaid, specifically to Senator Farnsworth's question.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I explained this before. The way that this registry was announced was through the research. I'm putting all this in quotes. I know folks in front of me can't see that. To research autism as a preventable disease. And so because that was the method through which the registry was going to be created, that is why I have named it in this amendment, to prevent it for the quote-unquote purposes of researching autism as a preventable disease.
Senator Farnsworth.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, that seems to conflict with her stated purpose. Her stated purpose was to prevent the creation of a registry, which I think we can all agree we don't want registries. But then the bill says that it's a different purpose, that it's a purpose of, for the purpose of, or to prevent the purpose of researching autism as a preventable disease. So, Mr. President, I think we need to be intellectually honest with this. And in order to do that, I think we actually have to have the language in this amendment to be exactly what the author wants it to be. So I would like to offer an oral amendment to change for the purpose of researching autism as a preventable disease to for the purpose of preventing an autism registry.
And Senator, will you state where you want that?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. So on line 1.7 and 1.8, we would replace for purposes of researching autism as a preventable disease and say for purpose of preventing an autism registry, and then the same thing on line 1.13 to prevent an autism registry.
The Secretary will report the amendment to the amendment, the oral amendment to the amendment.
Senator Farnsworth moves to amend the A50 amendment as follows. On page 1, line 13, delete everything after of and insert preventing an autism registry, period.
And he also wants that on line 1.13. So it's my understanding, just so I'm clear, Senator Farnsworth, you wanted it in 2 places, is that right?
Yes, Mr. President.
The Secretary is going to report it again, just so we're clear.
Senator Farnsworth moves to amend the A50 amendment as follows. On page 1, line 7, delete everything after the second of, and on page 1, line 8, delete as a preventable disease and insert preventing an autism registry. And on page 1, line 13, delete everything after of and insert preventing an autism registry, period.
Senator Farnsworth, to your oral amendment, which is an amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm not convinced that we have the language exactly the way we need to, so I will withdraw that amendment and think about it for a few more minutes. But I do want to point out that the purpose of this amendment is to prevent an autism registry. But this amendment appears to be trying to prevent some sort of research, so I will withdraw my oral amendment.
The oral amendment is withdrawn. Any other discussion? Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to offer an oral amendment.
That would be an amendment to the amendment, and where would you, and state your oral amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. On line 110, the first "or" is to be deleted, and insert a comma after addresses, and insert "or biometric data."
So are you reinserting? I thought you said that you were going to strike the "or." So are you putting it back there?
Mr. President, I'm adding an additional data point to that list. So essentially after email addresses, I wanted to read "or biometric information," actually.
So the Secretary will report the oral amendment, which will be an amendment to the amendment.
Senator Lucero moves to amend the A50 amendment as follows. On page 1, line 10, delete the first or, and after addresses, insert comma or biometric data.
Senator Lucero, to your oral amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. One correction to what the Secretary just read. Not biometric data, but biometric information.
The Secretary will report the oral amendment, which is an amendment to the amendment.
Senator Lucero moves to amend the A50 amendment as follows. Page 1, line 10, delete the first or, and after addresses, insert comma or biometric information.
Senator Lucero, is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. President.
Anything you want to say, or can I go to Senator McQuaid about what she wants to do?
I would like to speak to it.
Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. The reason I am including or proposing to have this addition is because the list there, beginning on line 1.9, data identifying an individual, including names, birth dates, addresses, telephone numbers, or email addresses, it doesn't state something to the effect of PII, which is an already defined term that is more expansive than what's listed here, which is to personally identify somebody. And because we are in an age here where there continues to be innovation and the harvesting of biometric information in other forms, whether it be blood work or other things that is happening, I want to make sure that in a list that is attempting to include information that could identify somebody, because the author chose not to reuse established terms already defined and instead reinventing an additional subset of established terms, I want to ensure that biometric information is included, because that can absolutely also identify individuals. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator McQuaid, your thoughts about the amendment to the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. If Senator Lucero would yield for a brief question.
Senator Lucero will yield. She will yield. He will yield. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe, Senator Lucero, this is a friendly amendment. I just want to make sure it would be biometric data that would identify an individual, not biometric data on a whole group, correct?
Senator Lucero, to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. What I have noticed here at this position in the chamber, that those that are immediately behind me, just the acoustics are a challenge for me to hear. And so I deeply apologize, Senator McQuaid. I'm going to turn around and look at you as you repeat the question, just so I can try to hear it.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to be sure it's just identifying biometric data of an individual, not on a group.
Just biometric information on an individual and not a group. Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, that's my intent. Whatever the remaining of that sentence is doing, I'm just adding to it the biometric information of an individual.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would see this as a friendly amendment.
Any other discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. Now we're on the underlying A50 as amended. Any other questions before we go to the author of the amendment and allow her to have the last word? Seeing none, Senator McQuaid, to your A50 amendment as amended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vote green.
The Secretary will take the roll on the A50 McQuaid amendment as amended. Senator Westland, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Zhang votes aye.
Senator Zhang votes aye.
and Senator Rest votes aye.
And Senator Rest votes aye. Members, if you're in the chamber, if you can vote. Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Liskey votes no.
Senator Liskey votes no.
Senator Johnson votes no.
And Senator Johnson votes no. All members desiring to vote has voted. The Secretary will close the roll. There being 39 ayes and 28 noes, the amendment to the amendment is, the amendment as amended is adopted. Seeing no further amendments, the Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
House File Number 2115, a bill for an act relating to human services, modifying policy provisions relating to aging and disability services, the Department of Health, direct care and treatment, substance use disorder services, and certain health insurance claims.
Third reading. Any other discussion before we vote? Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, this has been a tough day for long-term care providers on the floor of the Minnesota Senate. Our previous bill made hundreds of millions of dollars of cuts to Minnesota nursing homes, and now we're putting on additional mandates and regulations that don't even have to go through the simple process of proving that they're going to provide greater patient safety while avoiding a financial hardship for providers. And Mr. President, I'll be voting against this bill. I think it needs a lot more work and collaboration with providers to make sure that we're focusing on keeping patients and residents in long-term care safe. And what I've oftentimes seen from some of these groups that are pushing additional regulations is that they never look at what's already on the books and how we could streamline those regulations to best meet the needs of the residents in their care. And that's why many of these regulations weren't even brought forward by the regulator, the Minnesota Department of Health. And that's why we had an amendment today that would ask them to review the regulations, the new training requirements, and make sure they made sense, made sure that there's a cost-benefit analysis. And so I'm afraid, Mr. President, that these additional burdens are going to have a detrimental impact on our long-term care system and Minnesotans' access to long-term care here in the state, especially given the cuts that we had in the previous budget bill.
Senator Gruenhagen.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Members, I appreciate the efforts that have gone into this. I know it's well-meaning, and I just have to reiterate, members, we've got regulations and requirements and mandates in here that are going to drive up the cost to our nursing homes at a time when they're receiving cuts, and my nursing homes are basically having a hard time staying in business right now. I mean, it's just, we've got to come to the conclusion that we have to evaluate these. And, you've got the long-term imperative and Minnesota Department of Health. They didn't come forward with some of this stuff. It was other members, and that's fine, or other organizations. But the point is, they need to be evaluated. And I had an amendment to do that. And yet we refuse to do that and just continue to pile on when we're 53,000 workers short and our caregivers members. I mean, you cut their funding and you put more mandates onto them, not knowing whether it helps the patient or what the cost is? I mean, there's a reason government bankrupts things, okay? They bankrupted 2 of my nursing homes already. They're going to bankrupt more if this keeps going. And members, please start analyzing. We need comparative data with other states. We need to evaluate these additional mandates, whether they're cost effective and they actually help. Again, we need to be a referee, but referees just can't keep piling on regulations onto the game, okay? So please vote no. Let's send this back. Let's get these things evaluated and quit driving up the cost for our nursing homes and care providers and with mandates and requirements that we don't even know the cost or whether they're going to be helpful or not.
The last voice we will hear now is that from Senator Hoffman, who is the bill author. Senator Hoffman.
Mr. President, as we close this chapter in our work on the Human Services Policy Bill, I want to express my deep appreciation to everybody in this room for your dedication, your debate, and your drive to do what's right for Minnesota. This has been a year filled with complexity. We have navigated tensions and policy disagreements, as you could even see today, political noise, and competing priorities. But at the end of the day, we come together in this shared purpose, and it's absolutely an honor to be able to help build a better future for the most vulnerable among us. And Mr. President, we have taken those meaningful steps to strengthen our long-term care protections, ensure fair treatment of residents, and modernize our training requirements as this bill has it. We've expanded access, we clarified the rights, and we've lifted those barriers because the people we serve deserve more than just our attention, Mr. President, that they deserve action. Our work's not always easy. It is not easy. It's complicated. Everyone in this room will look at you with glazed eyes as you start to talk about disability wage services reinvention stuff, and you know that. But it's rooted in collaboration, it's rooted in empathy, and it's rooted in the understanding that government works best when it listens to the people and acts boldly on their behalf. We act boldly. That's what we have to do. As we close this session, Mr. President, I want to thank the incredible staff, and I named all those in the first bill that we have who have carried the weight in this policy work. We have one nonpartisan researcher, one nonpartisan analyst, Liam Monahan, amazing. In the state of Minnesota, should give him a raise. Elise Bailey, Christy Grom, Carrie Briones, our interns that always did that. Kyle, for helping us with the whole side of it. Kyle Raymond on the fiscal side. My committee administrator, David, Zach, Cassie, everybody that's in there, including the folks I listed before, our committee pages, Chloe, Ade, Olivia, Rowan. This is important work, Mr. President, and I want us to know this. Let's not be the end of our work, but a renewed beginning, because when we care for the most vulnerable in the state, when we put people before politics, we build a Minnesota that works for all of us. That's a Minnesota value. That's the Minnesota way. Mr. President, thank you for your collaboration. Please vote green. Let's keep going.
The Secretary will take the roll on final passage of House File 2115 as amended. Members, please vote. Senator Westland, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Zhang votes aye.
Senator Zhang votes aye.
And Senator Rest votes aye.
And Senator Rest votes aye. Members, if you're sitting in the chambers, will you please vote? Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Johnson votes no.
Senator Johnson votes no.
Senator Liskey votes no.
Senator Liskey votes no.
Mr. President.
Senator Jasinski.
Senator Miller votes no.
And Senator Miller votes no. All members having voted, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 35 ayes and 32 noes, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Senator Murphy for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to move a recess to the call of the President in order to receive messages from the House, and we'll only need a few members to come back to finish our work. And with that, Mr. President, I move a recess to the call of the President.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. The Senate is now in recess to the call of the President.